So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Dr. Joyner, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, I will. Could we stand, please? And while we're waiting, could we say a prayer for America, the world, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Fauci? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All.
Okay. Just some minor, I guess, direction before we get on to the superintendent's report. In terms of public participation, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment during public participation, please use the raise hand feature in the Zoom and wait to be called on by the meeting facilitator. Your microphone will then be unmuted and you'll be able to share your comments. Because we do have a large audience for this meeting, the board may not be able to hear all public comments live, but we will add them to the meeting minutes, the comments that were emailed to us already. Okay, Dr. Tracy, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, Madam President. May I make a request that all questions are held until after the complete presentation, so it's not broken.
I'm sorry, that was going to be part of my quick instruction, but go ahead. If we could just hold comments or questions until after the presentation's over, that would be great.
Hold on one second. President Rivera, if you could let the public know that we do have Spanish interpretation available if they click on the interpretation button.
Si necesitan servicio de traducción, en la parte de abajo de la pantalla hay un botón que dice Interpretation. Tienen que presionar ese botón.
Thank you. So good evening, board, members of the community, our parents, media, if they are listening to us this evening. I just want to say that I'm very grateful to this board for allowing us to come up with plans, even though there's still plans that I would consider somewhat still in draft form. The total plan will go to the board, to the State Board of Education on June 24th. And we have had other opportunities of presenting some aspects of this plan with the board. So I'm glad we are also presenting to more community folks to see what it is we're planning. I need to say that for the past 3 months or more than 3 months ago, we anticipated that school will look differently. And so with that anticipation, we went into full gear with what we call our Tiger Team or task force. And we planned a comprehensive plan with members of the community, parents, teachers, administrators, and we came up with a plan. And let me say this. The directive from Governor Lamont and Commissioner Cardona required that all school districts develop plans for 3 scenarios for fall 2020. 1, a plan to provide in-school instruction for all students on a full-time basis unless a family voluntarily opts into temporary remote learning. 2, a plan to provide both in-person and remote learning support options, hybrid, accessing instruction and curriculum online, resulting in limited student population on school premises at any given time. And 3, a plan for total remote learning to provide a strategy for the potential of future cancellation of school or certain class requiring all students to access instruction and curriculum online for a period of time. We are also told that if our plan does not include the 5-day in-person plan, we will be out of compliance with current state law regarding the number of school days and/or expectation of state leadership. This just came out of the press. So I needed to share that with you. So overview of our plan, we have plans in 4 major strategic areas: facilities or operations, health and wellness, technology and instruction. and we had a section on governance for communication. We have a number of individuals who are lined up to present this evening. Let me share who these people are. You have Mr. Michael Pinto in operations, Dr. Jennifer Vasquez, Mr. Peters on health, Mr. Joseph Alvarado on cleaning and the building, Mr. Paul DeMayo, transportation, Dr. White will deal with arrival and dismissal, Mr. Barbarado will also deal with classroom spacing, Mr. Pinto and Ms. Shernick for service, meal distribution, social emotional support, Ms. Monica Abbott and Joanna Sandberg Champion, instructional models, Ms. Keisha Red Hannans, professional learning, Ms. Keisha Red Hannans and Tessa Gomez Johnson, distant learning, Ms. Evelise Velasquez, special education, Ms. Tiffany Jackson, English learners, Mr. Pedro Mendia, disengaged youth, Ms. Gemma Joseph Lumpkin, after school programs, Ms. Gemma Joseph Lumpkin, athletics, Mr. Eric Potofsky, funding reopening plan, Mr. Philip Penn, and then I'll end with community support and closing, and then there will be questions. We now turn to
Madam President,
Mr. Golton.
thank you. Before we get into this presentation, could I ask the superintendent to repeat that last statement she made that came from the state regarding school openings?
Okay, thank you.
Hot off the press.
Yeah. Any plan submitted to the Connecticut State Department of Education on July 24th, 2020, that does not include a full reopening option as one of the three models, where all public school students have the opportunity to access school in person 5 days a week, will not be in compliance with current state law regarding the number of school days or expectations of state leadership.
All right, I just want to make sure I understand that before you move on, if you don't mind, Madam President.
Go ahead, Mr. Golton.
Thank you. Dr. Tracy, from what I heard you say, I haven't seen the memo, but what it sounded like you said is that has to be one of the options, but that may not be the final option that is used for school openings. Is that correct?
You have to present three plans, and one of them must have the 5 days in-person plan.
Got it.
Then we present, depending on health, the direction of the pandemic, the state will decide.
Thank you.
The system will decide, depending on the level of risk that we have.
Thank you, Madam President.
Now, let me turn to Attorney Michael Pinto on the operations side.
Good evening, members, Madam President, members of the Board of Education, and the New Haven Public Schools community and the community at large. Our focus on the operations, obviously we've been closed since March 12th, was to work on and develop a plan that was ensures our buildings are safe, that we have a safe plan, we have clean buildings, and that we're adaptive to changing conditions. We've been guided by three major goals. Next slide, please. The primary focus, obviously, the first and foremost, is to ensure student and staff safety. We are making sure that we provide a clean and safe learning environment for all of our staff and students. And we're also looking to be, as I said, adaptive. We need to be able to adapt in real time to changing conditions. There are some basic essentials for COVID-19 safety that as we reopen. Masks will be mandatory for all students and staff to reduce virus transmission. We're going to be working to ensure and maximize social distancing with a goal always of 6 feet. But we will be maximizing social distancing to the greatest extent possible. And we'll be working to teach and reinforce proper hand washing technique using the 20-second model endorsed by the CDC. We're also making some additional safety enhancements for COVID-19. We're acquiring and providing face shields for all to augment the masks for teachers. This will allow for more mobility so that they can teach in front of the classroom and move around more and have greater interaction while still maintaining safety. We're adding plexiglass barriers and other plastic sheet barriers in high interaction areas, including reception desks and food service lines. We're also distributing hand sanitizer. We have approximately 600 gallons on hand as we speak. We're acquiring several thousand gallons more. The hand sanitizer will be distributed throughout the classrooms and throughout schools strategically. And we're also developing uniform signage throughout across the district in multiple languages to reinforce our 3 W's: watch your distance, wear a mask, and wash your hands. Again, we'll be focusing on, and you'll be hearing about this shortly, enhanced cleaning and disinfection protocols and scheduling. We're going to be working with staff to maintain consistent teams to minimize cross-contamination of student groups. And we're going to limit the use of shared spaces and reduce the amount of shared equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Pinto.
In one more, one moment. I got one more part of this. We're looking to, as we've looked to make sure that our buildings are as flexible as possible. Obviously, they weren't designed for social distancing. However, we're utilizing detailed floor plans to evaluate all available space. We're reallocating some common areas where necessary, including cafeterias and gymnasiums, and potentially outdoor spaces if we need to. We're also developing training protocols for all staff to ensure that they understand and are clear as to where what expectations are. And we'll also be developing clear and concise communications to the public and to our staff and students so that everyone understands what the expectations and obligations are as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Pinto. We'll now turn to Dr. Jennifer Vasquez and Ms. Sue Peters, whoever goes first, or no, I'm sorry, Director Bond. We'll lead them off in this section. Director Bond.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you, and I hope that each of you are remaining safe, those of you that are watching and preparing for the fall for your children. The New Haven Health Department aims to for the health and well-being of the New Haven residents. And we know that school plays a pivotal role in the educational and social development of children. And we recognize that as we are planning to reopen, that we have to have sound public health and science evidence-based metrics to have embedded into the reopening plans. And so what we do know about the susceptibility and severity of illness and transmission of COVID-19 in children is that the best evidence currently that is available is that children are somewhat less likely than adults to get COVID-19 and are definitely much less likely to become severely ill if they get it, and appear to be less likely to spread the virus that causes COVID-19 to others in adults. However, we do know that children of all ages have been diagnosed with COVID-19, and although rare, some have had some case fatalities across the country. Measures to reduce the risk include making sure that we have the most safety protocols in place so that they can be adhered to. Our health committee's goal was to do just that. For the past few months, they have met and they were co-chaired by Dr. Jennifer Vasquez and Sue Peters, our school-based health center nurse, where they met and convened with the committee members to help and facilitate a plan and establish protocols that will be conducive to adhering to the CDC guidelines and our latest recommendations that we need to follow. So with that, I will now turn it over to Sue Peters that will provide you an overview of where we are with our health protocols and our safe reopening plans.
Thank you, Director Bond, and welcome to the Board of Education members and Madam President. If we can go to slide 13, just one back. Yeah, right there. So as Director Bond alluded to, we have met as a full committee for months on this, and the New Haven Health Department, in collaboration with New Haven Public Schools, has developed a pandemic response plan, like all districts need to do. And our response as district and school level is going to be based on the community transmission levels that we need to monitor and report so that we know what we're going to need to do to respond to increased transmission levels among students, staff, family members. So at level 1, they've developed the plan based on the low, moderate, and substantial community transmissions. So the level 1 is no community transmission, so no reported cases in the community. Level 2 would be moderate, meaning there are multiple cases in the community, and that's currently where we are. So everything in the plan that we hear from going forward is responding to this level in particular. If things were to get worse, the response is going to be different. Level 3 substantial is increased spread in towns and public places, and extended school dismissals would be certainly considered. Next slide. The highlights basically of our planning strategy as a committee was to first gather information from parents around their preference for learning format, if they were intended to come back to school, and their transportation needs, and I believe that has been done. That's another department, but we need to find out first how many students are going to be coming back in order to plan going forward. We have plans to monitor and track exposure and suspected cases of COVID-19 among both students and staff, and that's key to determining community transmission rates and working closely with the health department so that they can do contact tracing and work with the district to understand what the actual risk is in our community. We also are providing written protocols for containment plan for staff and students in the event that a student or staff is suspected to have COVID-19 or confirmed case of COVID-19. And they're very clear protocols about what will happen and when they can return to school and work. And the last one, these are just highlights, but we started with, again, recommendations to identify a separate isolation room in every building, which again is CDC recommended. And I know operations has been working to do that. Every building is different, but there will be a space to use as an isolation room should we need it. Visitors, in terms of visitors, they really should not be allowed in schools unless school business requires them to be there, like deliveries, picking up a child. Parent-staff meetings should be conducted by phone or by other electronic means to really limit, non-visitors into our buildings. Alcohol-based hand sanitizer will be supplied at school entrances and all classrooms, and students will be advised to do hand washing regularly through the day as sort of hand washing breaks, and when required, before or after eating, sharing any materials, before or returning from any location in the school back to the classroom. Keep each student's belongings separated from others and in individually labeled containers, cubbies, and avoid sharing materials, which we've heard. Next slide. Want to make sure, okay. In terms of events and gathering, we are following the latest guidelines in terms of where we are now in terms of moderate transmission, and that's to pursue virtual group events, gatherings, or meetings if possible, and promote social distancing at all time of at least 6 feet between people if events are held. We want to limit group sizes to the smallest extent possible. Again, the non-essential visitors, we need to limit that. Volunteers and activities involving external group organizations. We need to limit that as much as possible, especially with individuals who are not from the local geographic area. We need to pursue virtual activities and events in lieu of field trips, student assemblies, special performances, school-wide parent meetings, spirit nights, and so forth. And pursue options to convene sporting events and participation in sport activities that minimizes the risk of transmission of COVID-19 to players, families, coaches, and the communities. Next slide. This is specific to the nursing suites and school-based health centers. We have 17 school-based health centers. They're not in every school. Typically, our school nurses are in close proximity with school-based health centers. We have, but for the school-based clinics and nursing suites, we're looking at safety as students enter. We want to minimize traffic to and from the nurse's office and the school-based health center suite and keep them as safe as possible. So the number of chairs in the waiting areas are going to be decreased to allow for physical distancing and remove chairs not in use. This isn't on here, but we are asking teachers to call before they send students down so that we can monitor the traffic better, provide signage on cough etiquette, mask use, hand hygiene, and so forth, and create a dedicated parking spot for parents picking up sick children outside as close to the clinics as possible. We also want plexiglass windows to be installed in the reception area at the office manager desk for greeting students and families. And to provide, we're providing signage asking students to wait in designated area and to allow for traffic flow going and coming, have a separate waiting area for students who are there for reasons that are not related to an infectious illness. And with student temperatures, temperature screens will be taken at the entrance of the school-based health centers and nursing suite. And school-based health centers will share the ability with parents to see students not in school due to the pandemic or illness as a telehealth visit. We've already been doing that through this whole pandemic. A lot of our school-based health center mental health and medical staff have been working with our families and students throughout all of this. And I think I'm handing this over now to Jen.
Thank you, Sue. And good evening. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Tracy, and all of our guests for allowing me to share this information tonight. So in regard to students with special healthcare needs, all of our planning has involved planning for these students to be sure that their healthcare needs are met. So school nurses will continue regular health monitoring for these students and provide the healthcare that they need. And we are also planning for PPE for both staff and students as needed to keep this care safe. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, all students and staff will be required to wear masks while in school. If a student or staff member is not able to wear a mask, accommodations will be made in accordance with state guidelines. Parents are asked to provide a clean cloth mask for their child each day of the week. However, if a child forgets their mask or does not have one available, we will have masks available to provide on those incidences. Next slide, please. As far as mitigating the risk of infection in the schools, school staff will be tracking attendance very carefully, and the school nurse and office staff will work together to make calls to parents of a student who is absent and ask some clarifying questions about why the student is out of school that day. The school nurse will follow up with parents of any students who have symptoms that may be indicative of COVID-19. This follow-up and sharing of information is very important to the health and safety of the school community, and we do appreciate the collaboration of all parents in providing this information so that we can safely provide follow-up. The school nurse and the New Haven Health Department will coordinate with school administration to coordinate contact tracing for positive cases of any student or staff. And it is important for any parent to pick up a child who may become ill during the school day as soon as possible. Next slide. And lastly, if there is a positive case of COVID-19 in the school community, the school nurse will work with families to collect information, will notify the building principal, school administration, and myself. That information will be shared with Dr. Tracy or her designee and Director Bond so that contact tracing can be performed. Dr. Tracy and Director Bond will also collaborate on possible school closure, how long that closure will be, cleaning and disinfecting that will be needed in the school building, how education will continue during that school closure, and planning for reopening of school. And we will collaborate the Health Department and Board of Education on all communication to families as well. Thank you.
Thank you, health team. Thank you so much. We will now go to cleaning the building. Mr. Joseph Our recording, Pepe Barbarat.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, and New Haven family. So my task, facilities, is to make sure that our 41 buildings and approximately 44.2 million square feet is safe and clean for our students and staff to return. The good news is that our local 287 staff are essential workers, and there's a kind of a misconception that the buildings have been closed down and everything shut down. Well, while it was a time where it was closed to the public, our staff, our frontline workers have been in the building since day one, so they've been able to get a jump on the cleaning and disinfecting. So the cleaning actually removes the dirt and impurities from the surface, and the disinfecting actually kills the germs. So we've been in collaboration with 287 to set up our plan and to how we're going to do this. The CDC recommends that we clean and disinfect at least daily. Our custodial staff has been trained in how to use the proper cleaning protocols. They are in line with the SDS sheets that determine what's the proper PPE, the gloves, the mask, and eye protection. They've been adhering to that. And we performed a checklist that you'll see later on that is very intense and very specific to all the high frequency touch points that we are working on daily with the cleaning and disinfecting. So the other part of this is we're keeping a log so that every room has a list, and they check it off as they go. Some of the things, second slide. The other thing we're trying to do is we're scheduling our staff, some of our part-time staff. We're creating a 9-to-1 shift. We have that at a lot of the schools. We didn't have it at all the schools, and we're going to put probably double up that shift at the high schools. So that, again, the CDC recommends that we're cleaning restrooms at least daily. Our plan is to have that 9 to 11 person rotating through the school, just cleaning the restrooms and hitting high frequency touch points throughout the building, so that we believe the bathrooms will be cleaned every couple hours, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, then 1 p.m. And then we have the night shift come in that does a more thorough deep cleaning overnight and more disinfecting, so that it's clean and ready and up to go for the next morning. At that time, they'll be checking the soap dispensers, the towels, and all the materials to make sure that everything is stocked. Again, that one person will be just continuously doing all the common touch points throughout the list. And we're planning on doing some of the meals in the classroom. So we have garbage cans that will be dedicated, that the staff and the teachers will help us get emptied into the proper cans so that be disposed of properly each day. We're planning on doing the water fountains where we want to block off the water fountains so that we can use those as hand sanitizing stations, which would be strategically throughout the school, so that people, we hope to get enough sanitizer to put it in every classroom. We're working on that, but this would also allow us to have it strategically placed. We wouldn't have to buy holders for that. We can do 2 functions at once and keep the fountains closed and also do the hand sanitizing. We were going to take off doors, or at least open doors wherever we can, to limit the amount of contact you need to get in and out of the rooms wherever we can. We're going to utilize the disinfecting wipes, or we will have spray bottles with our disinfectant with things that the teacher could use to periodically wipe down their desk if they feel the need. And then we're working on signage throughout the building. You'll hear that they purchased a new machine that will be able to give us signage to help encourage the hand washing and the social distancing throughout the school. So this last page is the list, and it shows actually each room and everything that we've identified that has to be done. And so it will be initialed on a daily basis and logged. And we're using, the products we're using are part of our green cleaning program. Although the CDC has allowed us to go beyond that and use bleach in certain conditions, we're trying to stick with our green cleaning products. The Rejuve and Arsenal are the things that are EPA certified and approved for us to be used to do this project. So again, it's important to us that we log these things and that we have a reference that we can tell when things were done and who did them. Lastly, I would say that addressing some of the air conditioning needs, we're upgrading to MERV 13. Our CFO was able to get us some funding through the CARES Act that we have MERV 8s now. The CDC recommendation is that we get to MERV 13. So we're going to upgrade to that. Thank you.
Dr. Tracy, you're on mute. Dr. Tracy, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barbarato, for your presentation. I want to say to the rest of the panelists, make sure that you follow your time frame. Everyone has a given time frame, so stay within your time frame. We will now move to Mr. Paul DeMeo, first student, who will share with us what's happening with transportation and cleaning.
Good evening, members of the board, and everybody participating on this call, and thank you for allowing us to participate. Based on the current moderate transmission levels, students will be required to wear face masks while on the bus. A stock of face masks and coverings will be stocked on school buses in the event that the driver needs to hand out or a student's mask becomes damaged or goes missing. School bus drivers will be required to wear the mask while loading and unloading the vehicles. They'll be observing and enforcing all loading, unloading, and other safety practices as directed and as may change through the guidelines. Students will be, you can go on to the next one. Students will be required to load the bus rear to front order and then disembark the bus front to rear order. That's to minimize cross-contamination and try to enforce as much social distancing as possible. Under the moderate transmission level, buses will be loaded to near full capacity at this time. So we'll have signage available both on the buses and in our facilities. We recognize that for parents, students, and drivers to feel comfortable about safety on a school bus during these unprecedented times, we must ensure that we're adapting and recommending the best operating practices possible. These protocols also include school bus disinfecting. First Student has collaborated with various government agencies, healthcare organizations, university research teams, school bus manufacturers to test and share information about virus dwell time and specifically the COVID virus dwell time and bus contamination methods. The disinfectant process recommended to the district is a long-lasting disinfectant solution called Zuno, Z-O-O-N-O, Z as in zebra 71. It provides an extended period of protection resistant to cross-contamination. Z71 provides a shield of protection that kills the corona or COVID-19 virus and other germs for an extended period of time. Applications to the school buses would be through a third-party vendor to maximize and guarantee that every bus is logged, that it's done within the recommended guidelines of the product application. Our company, our parent company, is successfully using Z71 on passenger vehicles in the UK. It is a highly successful product. Z71 is a non-toxic, FDA compliant, registered with the APA pending list and approval. It's a long-lasting shield. It attracts the pathogens in a COVID-19, makes contact with the treated surface. The pathogen makes contact with the treated surface, the pathogen ruptures based on the appropriate structure of the component in the product, and it kills it. So we found it to be very highly successful, recommended to the district, and that's right now currently what the plan is.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeMeo. We now go to arrival, Dr. White, and then classroom spacing after that, Dr. White and Mr. Joseph Barbarato. Dr. White.
Okay. Good evening, board and the public. Arrivals are going to be very important to the day. First and foremost, obviously, if your child is not feeling well, please keep them home. Also, parents, we need your help in checking for temperatures each day so that, again, if your child has a temperature, please do not send them to school. And also let your school's nurse know that they have a temperature so that, again, we can assist you in monitoring to make sure they stay safe. A big culture change is going to be, we're going to be limiting the number of visitors and parents into the building to prevent unnecessary additional people arriving into our buildings. We know this is a big culture change, but we are moving more to a kiss and go of dropping your child at the door so that we can, again, keep your child safe inside the building. We're repeating this. We've asked you to students will be wearing face masks. There will be mask breaks throughout the day. We ask that you start getting your child used to wearing the mask now so that they will be able to do that during the school day. And then also, as always, maintaining social distance. Please help practice with the kids being able to keep that 6 feet distance. And of course, we'll have frequent hand washing during the day, before and after meals, before and after bathroom use, and especially if they're coughing and such. We do want to make sure students are doing that 20-second hand wash frequently throughout the day.
Spacing?
Yep, I'll start that. Now, we have been working on the premise of the 6 feet of social distancing. This gives you a little bit of the radius that creates the space to do that. We're looking at each of our buildings. Obviously, we have 41 buildings. Every building is unique in its structure. So we're looking at what could be done, how many students can fit safely into the space. There's a column that talks about 3-foot spacing because that was recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. But we are at this point continuing working based on the 6 feet of distancing. Mr. Barbarato has done spacing charts for our buildings in terms of our large spaces such as cafeterias, gymnasiums, auditoriums, and any large space that could be used as a secondary purpose so that we can, again, take care of our students throughout the day.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. White. And I need to add here, we also had some individuals from the State Department that came up today and went around to some of our largest schools with Dr. White to look at the space that we have and to give some recommendations to us. I just needed to add that in. We move on to food service, Attorney Pinto and Ms. Gail Sherney, food service.
Good evening. This is Gail Sherry with the Food Service Department, and we have created plans to adapt to our low risk, medium risk, and high risk transmissions. So we have come up with different ways. Either one, the students will come down to our serving line to receive their meal, and the meal will be in a container, a to-go container that then they would take either to eat at a designated area or the classroom. The other options are to have grab-and-go kiosks in the hallways. And we also are thinking of pre-K to kindergartner. We will have breakfast or lunch in the classroom, and our staff and school staff will help distribute those to the classroom. And of course, we are also anticipating that maybe not all students will be partaking and attending at our schools, and we are setting up a curbside distribution. And that will be designated basically with each school principal to designate a safe location for us to offer that.
Thank you. So you've covered meal distribution in that too?
Yes.
Gail? Yes, okay. Dismissal, Dr. White,
Yep.
2 minutes.
Yep. And again, along with dismissal is going to be flexible. Each building principal will come up with their required needs based on what best suits their building. And again, this is limiting space. This is, again, we know this is about a culture shift. Families are used to walking into many of our buildings. We need to develop procedures, and schools are developing those procedures so that we can return your child safely to you each day and continue to limit the spread by having as few people coming in contact within our buildings. Stay tuned. There will be more information provided by your individual schools about what these dismissal procedures will be.
Thank you, Dr. White. Ms. Monica Abbott and Ms. Jonah Sandberg champion social emotional supports for our students and teachers.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Tracy. Good evening, Madam President, the members of the board, New Haven Public School staff and families. As we return to school, we know that the social, emotional, and wellness of our students and staff need to be supported by New Haven Public Schools. We know we need to make sure the social and well-being of our students and staff are a high priority. So when we return to school, we must reestablish a sense of community. And some ways in which we will do so is really look at school community builders. We will provide school community builders for each school building in order to provide opportunities for reconnection and socialization. Also, we want to continue the Wellness Wednesdays. When we went to distance learning, we provided opportunities for students to engage in socialization through our Wellness Wednesdays. We got feedback from families, from educators, that the Wellness Wednesdays provided opportunities for students to engage in social events, even with the school closure. Also, we're going to spend time training our counseling and mental health staff to make sure they're prepared for our students to return into the school building.
Thank you. Next slide. For our students, thank you. Good evening, everyone. For our students, our main focus, again, as Johanna stated, is to make sure that we are addressing the psychological and social emotional needs as they return back to school. With that, we will provide educators resources that will support SEL throughout the whole entire academic day through academic integration. An example of that would be creating a morning welcome routine, which provides teachers a time to check in with each individual student, as well as for students to hear and learn about the other students in the classroom, to develop relationship skills and to get back that time that they've lost from the beginning of March when we closed down schools. As Johanna stated, we will be working in collaboration with our school support teams, school psychologists, school social workers, and school counselors to work to support a multi-tiered system of supports so that we can identify students that may need more supports and provide explicit SEL lessons for schools to use to support the children. And then also collaborate with community partnerships so that if students need wraparound services, that information is available as well. One of the things that we really want to make sure happens for all schools is that there is a high focus on allowing opportunities for students to socialize with their peers. So those times will be built directly into the schedule every day that they are actually physically in the building.
And as for our educators, we know we need to provide them with resources and supports as well. So one thing we'll do is make sure that there'll be wellness checks for our staff, make sure their return back to work is smooth. We're also planning to partner with our EAP program, our Employee Assistance Program, in order to maintain services for our staff. Also, we want to make sure that we provide educators with look-fors so that they will be able to assess in their students stress and anxiety and be able to discuss concerns with the mental health professionals within their school building.
Okay, in regards to our family connection, we would like to make sure that we're all, as stated earlier, we are unifying the message to our students of the safety and wellness of them as they return back to school. With that being said, we would provide the most updated information and resources available to help support parents with what was stated earlier, with practicing the protocols and making sure that they understand that there's new norms in the building so that that can help alleviate the stress before they get back to school so they're used to it. So we were talking about earlier the 3 W's: watch your distance, wash your hands, and wear your mask, to start practicing that with your children. Another thing is to continue to provide relevant resources for families, either through the parent link or through the website, which we've provided some resources on there. For example, one thing coming up recently soon is the thermometer distribution process, where they will be providing thermometers through the New Haven Health Department, and there's many different dates. So we're going to get that information out to parents so they can go ahead and get the thermometers for taking temperatures before school. And then finally, as Johanna stated earlier, it's going to be really important to develop and reestablish the sense of community. And it will be challenging because we can't do the things like in-house celebrations and town meetings, but it'll be important for the schools to recommit with the parents to connecting families and schools, saying that we are all in this together and that we want to rebuild the climate and culture that focuses on academics and social needs of all students.
So before we segue into the instructional model, let me say this. Our team, we have discussed the importance of not going back to school and starting right away with assessments, getting into instruction right away. We need to make sure that our students' mental, social, emotional needs and our staff, those are taken care of up front. As I said before in another presentation, I want my students to have fun the first couple of weeks of school. Just fun, talking back with their classmates, even though they can't get too close to them, but at least having that level of consideration for our students and our staff. We have to do that. If the health and well-being of our students and staff, that's paramount for us. Now, instructional models, Ms. Keisha Redhand.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, families, students, staff, and the general public. For fall 2020, we've created 3 instructional models based upon the risk levels that are deemed by our local health officials. If we're at a low risk level, we will open schools fully, 5 days a week, all students in school. But parents, you will also have the option to have your students engaged in distance learning. Many of you have filled out the survey that was sent, it's about 2.5 weeks ago. We will conduct another survey in August to get your final decisions on how you want the model of instruction delivered to your children. If we're at a moderate risk level, this is our hybrid model. Students in pre-K to 3 will come to school 4 days a week. And the 5th day, they will be engaged in distance learning. Students in grades 4 to 12 will come to school in person 2 days a week and 3 days engaged in distance learning. The 5th day, you might ask, well, why are pre-K 3 only coming 4 days a week? The 5th day is a planning and preparation day for our staff members. As you can imagine, this is an arduous task for our staff members to engage in. And so we want to make sure that they properly plan and have preparation time in order to do that planning for our students. Parents, you will also still have the option in the hybrid model under moderate risk for your students to engage in distance learning. And finally, we have our high risk model. This is model C, where school is closed for all students and everyone is engaged in distance learning. You will hear shortly a little bit more about our plans for distance learning and how they vastly differ from what we offered in March of last year.
Thank you.
You want me to do this? Okay. Our preferred plan in New Haven Public Schools, as we look at the priorities, ensuring student and staff safety, as well as advancing the academic growth for all students, our preferred plan is the moderate plan. And as you've heard from our health officials, we're at moderate risk at this time. That is the plan that is our hybrid plan for learning. I would like to point out that in this plan, students in grades 4 to 12 will come to school on an AABB schedule. Monday and Tuesday, one group of students will come to school, and then on Wednesday and Thursday, another group of students will attend school, and Friday will be utilized as the planning day. Please know that other grades will be phased in over time, and that is dependent upon space, staffing, and resources that we have at our disposal.
Ms. Adams, please segue with Ms. Tessica Johnson into professional learning. Everything we do, there has to be supports for staff in professional learning.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Tracy, members of the board, and our school community at large. On June 8th, we began 2 weeks of online professional learning for all staff members of New Haven Public Schools. These trainings were offered by their peers and members of our community. Each of our trainers volunteered their time and services. As you can see on the screen, there was a wide array of menu choices. During the first week, we focused on Google Suite platform tools. The second week of training, we focused on how to use technology tools for content-specific instruction, whether in a hybrid or remote learning environment. And these trainings were facilitated or conducted by our curriculum supervisors and outside vendors in some cases. Our plan is to build on the peer-to-peer training throughout the year as teachers collaborate in professional learning communities and present exemplary practices to each other across the district. Thank you.
And thank you to the board for allowing us to purchase and partner with Link Spring. We have engaged in a series of summer institutes for our leaders as well as our teachers this summer, and we have some more institutes to occur. The feedback has been pretty positive. Teachers and leaders are feeling very strong about the possibilities and how it's going to improve and transform their overall instructional practices. So we definitely wanted to acknowledge the board for your support in helping us to ensure that we can have equity across the district by ordering this platform for all of our schools.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haddon.
Just one second. So as just building on what Tessa stated, so Link Springs offers us 150 hours of virtual PD. Teachers, we are going to continue with peer-to-peer training throughout the year. So we'll be tapping into you. Any staff members on right now listening, we'll be tapping into your talents and utilizing your strengths to help your colleagues. And curriculum supervisors will continue their ongoing support through workshop facilitation and curriculum revisions. There you go, Doc.
Now we segue to distance learning. Ms. Ivaliz Velasquez.
Good evening, Dr. Tracy, board members, the entire community. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about distance learning. As you can see, a lot of work has gone into this. We are halfway through since March of building this system, this distance learning system for all. And I will tell you that I am incredibly impressed with the level of dedication from teachers, the innovation, the creativity that's gone into curating a set of resources that are going to make the experience for students and for families in general much more engaging and instructionally sound. So I won't repeat some of the things that have been said. You know, safety is our first concern, but then it's also to engage students thinking about their emotional health, their collaboration and connection to peers and to teachers, and then getting them ready to really enjoy again what school has to offer them. I will say a couple of things that will be different as we're building this. First of all, I will say that we are taking one platform forward as the landing pad where all students and families will find information. So we really want to streamline and have one-stop shopping. So we've adopted Google Suites, which includes Google Classrooms and Google Meets. Those are going to be the primary ways that students access their synchronous and asynchronous lessons. Synchronous defined as live streaming of lessons. Asynchronous you can think of as more of activities and assignments that will also use resources on the internet and live video and very innovative strategies. Again, engagement has to be our big goal there. I will also say that because of Link Spring, which you've already heard about, we are able to support teachers all the way through this process. Like I said, we are curating some of the very best content and strategies for engaging students, and everyone is a part of that and is able to access this magnificent, I want to say magnificent training. I've been a part of it already, and we are very happy with the way that LinkSpring is going to allow us to support teachers and to do more communication broadly, because we also are concerned about equity. We want to make sure that we streamline the platform, but then we also want quality across the board. I'll end with saying this. We are very interested in your input, and we are going to build a system so that you not only get support with the technology pieces, but that we are constantly thinking about input from parents that we could then, send to teachers so they can continue to refine what they're doing. Although we're going to be very planful, things are changing very quickly, so we want to hear from you, and we are going to be responsive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Velasquez. Now we have Ms. Tiffany Jackson, Special Education, that will be followed by Pedro Mendia, English Learners. Ms. Jackson.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Tracy, our board, our family, and our New Haven Public Schools community for being with us this evening. So I'm going to present a little bit of information, not exhaustive information. However, I want to make sure that we have information that's going to be helpful for our families. So first and foremost, students with disabilities, we're going to make sure that our students are provided with services in accordance to their IEP. The second thing that we have to make sure is that any decisions that we're making is based off of feedback from our staff and our professionals working with our students. We'll talk a little bit later about the continuum of services that we're going to provide that will address both the academic and the social emotional needs. Planning, again, we'll talk a little bit about what that planning would look like, whether it's in person, hybrid, or a virtual experience. And again, making sure that we're following all special education laws and provisions. As mentioned earlier, a lot of the information that we have to share has to do with the communication between special education and general education, making sure that, again, when students are coming back into our buildings, making sure that there's continual assessment of our students to determine whether or not our goals and objectives are able to be met. We'll continue with progress monitoring to make sure to see whether or not students' learning needs are being met and making adjustments as necessary. And one of the things that we have to do, I mentioned this, and I'm going to continue to mention this over and over again, the decisions that we have to make are going to be in accordance to our feedback from our families and from our students, as we have been learning some of our, getting feedback from our families about things that were working for them and things that have and have not been working for them. I'll go through this relatively quickly as far as the continuum of services. So we'll continue to provide services for our students from ages 3 to 21. The learning, again, for most of our students, many of our students, again, follows exactly what we've been talking about for our general education peers, providing with some accommodations and modifications, the wearing of the mask, social distancing, blended learning opportunities, and to the extent possible, limiting the number of cross interaction between students. One of the things that in working with our students that are working within our students within our self-contained classroom settings, where we have a number of students in our classrooms are busting at the seams, we may in some regards have to utilize additional staffing to look at social distancing within those classrooms, because it's not just the students and staff, but we have a lot of professionals who go in and out of the classrooms to support our students who have a variety of needs. And in areas where we have students who have specific healthcare needs and require more physical contact, again, we would be looking at more regular health checks and providing some additional PPE for our staff and students. And just really quickly, as I mentioned before, this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the things that we would have to consider for in-person instruction, making sure that we have more frequent cleaning of our sensory areas, providing in some cases some individual sensory kits for students, looking at transparent face masks for students and staff, in populations where they require more visual cueing. So for our speech and hearing, students with speech and hearing impairments, preschool, students who may require some additional cueing. And then really making sure for our students that we're explicitly teaching them changes in the routines, routine practices through social story, visual cues, and other developmentally appropriate strategies. And some of the other things that are important to know for in-person, really looking at Again, limiting the number of student visitors in the building, a continuation of virtual PPTs where possible and in consent and agreement with families, looking at consideration of, I guess the slides are moving, I'm sorry, looking at for some of our related service staff in places where we're not able to social distance, but making sure to maintain the safety, health and safety of students and staff, looking at the utilization of staff in desk shields where appropriate. And again, as I mentioned, in some cases, we may need additional staffing to make sure that we ensure social distancing. The other thing that we've learned our lessons just from this, since the start of this pandemic event regarding distance learning, we know that for many of our families, the notion of utilizing Google Classroom and Class Dojo and going online was not necessarily working for them. Some of the things that we've done even over our summer school period is looking at things like, packets and long-term projects and assignments and working with our families utilizing live interactive platforms, pre-recorded mini lessons, individualized lessons, providing materials remotely, YouTube videos and other streaming efforts, and teleconferencing with parents as needed. And I think that's it for me, but I want to just say we also have on this Thursday an opportunity for parents to be able to weigh in and continue the conversation as it relates to special education. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Mendia.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, members of the community at large. It is the goal of New Haven Public Schools that English learners be provided with a standards-based instructional program that addresses their linguistic, academic, and social-emotional needs in order for them to access grade-level curriculum. It is critical that the following supports, considerations, and conditions be in place regardless of the instructional model being followed, whether it is in person or through distance learning. It is critical the close collaboration between general education, TESOL, and bilingual teachers in order to determine the individual students' needs. Clear understanding of the linguistic and academic profile of our diverse learning population. Focus on language development in the 4 domains to acquire grade-level content. Assignment, modifications, adaptations, and targeted scaffolds. Ongoing communication with families in languages that they understand, integration of social-emotional learning across the curriculum, the use of portfolio assessments with authentic work, and access to supplemental language development platforms. The following objectives in the next slide delineate the action steps that the district's English learners action plan will put in place in order to resolve with the following intended outcomes. 1, ELS will continue to receive the language instructional services, such as bilingual education, ESL, shelter instruction, and other English language support programs. 2, English learners will receive the required bilingual education services. Currently, we have 27 bilingual schools with mandated native language supports in Spanish, Pashto, Arabic, and Mandarin, 4 of the over 49 different languages represented among our English learner population. Number 3, teachers will have a clear understanding of the students' linguistic and academic profile. And finally, the students will be reacclimated with the learning environment with a sense of reduced anxiety.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mendia. We will turn to Ms. German Joseph Lumpkin, has disengaged youth and after-school programs. And yes, go ahead, Ms. Lumpkins, you have 5 minutes for both.
Our goal with this approach is to bring back all of our students. We know that we have had students who have been tenuously engaged, students who have been moderately engaged, and some of our students who were not engaged at all pre-COVID. We worked to identify who those students were. We've identified approximately 4,000 students. And we are actually, as we talk about disengagement, we're actually making the shift to vulnerable students. What we know is that some of our families are new to this idea of vulnerable students because they have faced unexpected economic issues. They have faced unexpected stresses, which have impacted their students and could possibly impact their students' ability to fully engage. So we are working to move on to to the next slide, to ensure that we have a transition plan that impacts students who are potentially at risk. I talked about some of our families who we had not previously identified, but we have students who are homeless, students who are in foster care, and students who have that history of being excluded from the classroom for behavior issues that we are targeting. We have to reach out to those families and touch them on a personal level. We've made contact with about 3,000 of those families over the summer, and we will continue to engage them to transition them for the new reopening of our school. As you know, we have a code of conduct, a new code of conduct that we are implementing. We expect that to help support us in keeping students engaged and connected to schools and to strengthen our school climate through restorative practices. I want to underscore care coordination because we're finding that families are facing complex issues that they have not faced before. And we need to partner with our community partners to help us figure out how to address all those needs, whether it's economic, social, emotional, medical issues that are confronting families that they previously had not have had to deal with. And we also reimagine our staff and the disciplinary supports that our staff, the training our staff will need to address disciplinary issues. So we intend to work with our ISS, our student retention workers, our dropout prevention workers, and others to help support the work. Next.
Thank
slide.
you. Yes,
Okay, I thought I would get through this without the baby bomb. But finally, as you know, we are working to deepen our community partnerships. In particular, partners such as Clifford Bears, partners who support us in dealing with disengaged youth and creating the spaces within our school community so that when students come in with the stresses that we know that they will be dealing with, we have spaces, the training, the staff, the collaboration to support their work.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joseph Lumpkin. Athletics.
Good afternoon, everybody. So obviously our goal in athletics, if possible, is to get the kids back to participating. We're partnering with the CIAC and the State Medical Society and the State Medical Sports Medicine Society. There's guidelines are just summarized here. There's a lot more on the links that I put into this document here, but just quickly, all our athletes will be asked to register and have physicals. We have a health screening protocol that we developed and sent to our health department where there was approved, where our athletes will undergo a questionnaire and temperature checks before they participate every day. They will be required to wear face masks, coaches and officials also. And if there is people allowed in the games, then that will apply for that also. Start date for football would be August 17th and August 27th for all other fall sports. We also have a protocol for busing where there'll be only one athlete per seat, and we'll follow the same guidelines for loading and dropping that the city will be following for regular pickup and drop off. And then finally, we are looking at, depending on where we are with the virus, modifying the schedule if there's sports where we will only be playing sports against neighboring towns to limit the transportation and time on bus. And obviously this is all depending on the, this being a go based on where we are with COVID and approval from the health department and our district.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pachowski. Now, all of these plans require financial resources. Let me turn to Mr. Philpan to give us an update.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Let me kind of take you through our current thinking on how we're financing all this. In a worst case scenario, we think we may spend as much as $13.9 million to reopen the district safely. That includes a lot of items that we're hoping not to have to spend, but are prepared to if needed. The CARES Act grant, which is part of ESERF, is going to pay for about $8.4 million of that. And the balance, if we need it, will have to come from a combination of FEMA, additional aid from the state, or from our own general fund. Last night, we presented the abstract for that eSurf grant that's related to CARES. And if you go back and review the materials that are on our website, you'll notice that a key needs that we tried to address were the environmental health and safety of the students and staff, and a shift to be able to go to online learning on short notice. Next slide, please. Specifically, the items that we identified were academic, including temporary staff, software for our English language learners to learn distantly, professional development, which we've already talked about tonight, PPE, building modifications and extra cleaning supplies, technology items that include completing the one-to-one device initiative, doing appropriate upgrades to classroom teacher technology, and being able to have robust distance learning. Represents the bulk of the grant at $5.5 million. We also have additional costs in there for student social and emotional learning supports, K-2 individual supplies, disengaged youth, and some miscellaneous items that add up to the 8.4. And if you go on the district's website, you'll see all the detailed information that was provided to the board at F&O that supported those numbers. We could potentially have to engage additionally temporary classroom space to rent at a cost of almost $2 million. If we need to move furniture out of classrooms as a means of increasing the spaces within the classrooms, you'll see the cost noted there. We talked about additional desktop barriers and other classroom modifications that may need to take place if the conditions worsen. Other student supports, additional professional development, increased custodial hours above our current expectations, 2 or 3 rounds of additional air filters beyond the ones that Mr. Barbarata had already talked about earlier. Do we need to engage something for transportation for sick students? And we've also had expenditures from March 13th through June 30th that would also have to be part of our expectations. Some things to keep in mind. The federal guidance right now is that we do have to exhaust our CARES Act funds before accessing FEMA funds. Nevertheless, we're going to try and pursue as much as we can of what we incurred before June 30th. The major disaster declaration that covers the state of Connecticut is currently set to expire on July 31st. There is no indication yet as to whether or not that's going to be continued. In a major disaster, FEMA only pays for 75% of the costs, and the other burden is on the locality to come up with the 25% difference. Now, the good news here, if there is any, is that there could be some additional state funds that are available because the state did hold back a portion of the CARES grant, and there's an additional amount that was allocated directly for the governor's discretion. We've been participatory in 2 different surveys that have come out from the State Department of Education and the Office of Policy Management to measure our costs. And we're going to see if there's additional funding that comes out, but there's no indication yet what or any, if any, that amount will be. But as we continue to go forward, the priority is going to be on student staff safety in our spending patterns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. And let me say this. We are in the family community support aspect. Families play a critical role in supporting the new culture of health and safety that each of our schools will establish. More importantly, families can help mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 in our schools by doing the following. 1, checking their children daily for COVID symptoms and keeping them home from school if they are sick, or if they have had close contact with a person diagnosed with the virus. 2, supporting the use of face covering or masks in school and on the bus, arranging alternate transportation if possible, and communicating concerns with teachers and school leaders. And 3, continue to follow state guidance on health and safety outside of school. I want to thank my staff, my team, for their presentation this evening. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of them and really appreciate them for what they have done. It has taken us quite a few months to get to this level. And let me say that parents and staff, I want to recognize and acknowledge your fears up front. I hear you. I am in the same place too, because I'm in the age group that they say should stay home. So I acknowledge your fear. I am there with you. But let me say this, we're not perfect. Neither have we presented a perfect plan. What I'm asking is that I want you to know that by no means this is easy. It's a gargantuan task. We're looking for supports. we're looking for patience and understanding as we plod through these plans. I also want to thank my board for the patience in listening to us ranting along and saying what we need to say. I know there may be a lot of questions more than there are answers. So thank all my panelists for your participation this evening. Thanks to everyone who is listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy and staff. At this point, I guess we'll open it up to board member questions, comments before we go to public participation. Dr. Jackson?
Thank you so much for all the hard work that you guys have done. I could see it in your presentations. I have a couple of questions. So one of them goes to the, I guess, to Dr. Velasquez or Sue Peters. You spoke about telehealth and coming from a community provider, it got my attention. So are you billing for your telehealth visits?
Yeah, Dr. Jackson, this is Sue Peters. And hi, that's a great question. When I was referring to telehealth, yes, they are. In the same way that we would bill for school-based health center visits through, most of our kids do have either Husky, Medicaid, whatever insurance they do have. We see kids whether they have insurance or not. But yes, telehealth medicine, it's broadened the billing opportunities as well, so that students, if they opt to stay home and they're in our caseload, we can continue to see them and serve them. Especially the mental health piece has been ongoing through all of this. That's been the greatest need, to be honest with you.
Right, yeah, and I agree with you. And the reason why I'm asking is, because telehealth is kind of weird billing wise. If you do a telehealth visit and you bill for that, there has to be a 7-day window for them to get billed again in like that type of encounter. So how does that interfere with their physician that they have outside? How are they going to engage that student? And I was just going to say, you can, there are other ways to do that. And I feel that if you're billing that telehealth visit and the child goes home, how is their primary care going to manage? Because they're not going to bring that child into the office because of the symptoms. They're going to most likely do a telehealth visit. So I'm just saying that maybe there should be a little more conversation about that to figure out how that will work.
I think it's a great point. I can get in touch also with our health partners at Yale and Fairhaven. They're the ones really doing that remotely. When they come back, if there are students, for example, at, I don't know, Morrow Sheridan, that don't come back, they can do it, from the school. And just as they were doing before. But in terms of the actual billing restrictions, the 7 days or so, I don't want to misspeak because I'm not as familiar with that piece, but I can certainly get back, find out.
Yeah, I guess I'm bringing that up because I think that we should just talk about that a little bit more.
Sure.
So that, our community partners, so we're all still working together and no one's like, oh my God, because it's hectic. You know how bad it is out here.
Yeah.
Okay. And thank you. I have a couple other questions. This is for Mr. Pepe. Mr. Pepe, you were talking about the cleaning of the rooms, the cleaning of the classrooms. Who's responsible for cleaning in the classrooms during the day, the touch spots in the classroom?
Well, we have 287 local staff. There's a building manager in each of the schools. And right now, in the summer, also the assistant building manager is on during the day. But when school is reoccupied again, it's the building manager. And in some of the larger schools, they have some part-time people scheduled with them. But again, we want to put a 9-to-1 person to help where we need in the schools where we don't have anyone. And it's based on about 30,000 square feet is how we started the formula we have to determine how many custodians are in each school. So again, we're looking to shift some of the night crew onto days to cover that.
No, so who's doing the in the classroom? The light switches, you know, the desks and,
That's
you
going
know,
to be the 9 to 1 person is going to be rotating the school doing those things.
going to be going into classrooms?
I don't think we're going to do a lot with the kids in the classroom.
That's
I
what my
think,
question is about.
right. We won't do it until the classrooms are empty.
So the classroom doesn't get wiped down during the day?
No, not in the plan right now.
Is that something that is supposed to happen?
Well, I think it's out of a concern that we spray and wipe and there's some indication that may not be a good thing to do when the kids are around. So we're gonna try and do that after hours. Really, the disinfecting in the classrooms will happen at the end of the day and at night when there's no one in the school.
So the classroom is not going to be wiped down even with like a Clorox wipe or a Lysol wipe. I'm getting this question and parents want to know, in the classroom, who's responsible for wiping down touch points in the classroom?
Well, we will supply the teachers with some disinfectant spray and some I'm not sure we'll have wipes as such, but we'll have Microsoft cloths and disinfecting spray that they'll be able to use during the day.
But we can't use spray in the classroom with kids in there.
But if she wants to wipe down her desk or something, they could do that. I'm saying we're not going to go in front. We're not going to wipe down children's desks while they're sitting at the desk.
Okay, so I think I would like something a little bit more solid. Maybe, I don't know, when we have follow-up questions about the procedure of wiping down a classroom during the day with the kids in the class.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. And Mr. Pepe, MERV 13, I didn't quite understand what that was. What's a MERV 13?
Well, that's the ability of the filter to stop particles that go through. Right now, district-wide, we use a MERV 8, which is it's one of the best filters that we can get. We're paying for our buck. We only change those annually. They stop almost all dust particles. A MERV 13 will stop more refined, smaller particles. They'll need to be changed more often during the year, and that is the recommendation from the CDC. If a lot of people ask for HEPA filters, they don't make those for the units that we have, and even if they did, they would reduce the static pressure in the units so much so that we wouldn't get proper airflow in the building. So the MERV 13 is where we want to get to.
Okay. You want to say something, Dr. Tracy?
May I ask that when the board asks a question, just ask the question and I'll direct you to the staff members who.
Sure, that's fine. Oh, because I was writing questions as they spoke. So then Mr. Pepe's going to follow up with direction then, Dr. Tracy, of who will be wiping down in the classroom and how we'll be doing that, because he says we're not doing that right now.
Let me say this, understanding that within each building, we have several classrooms. In some buildings, let's take, for example, Cross with 16 to 1,700 students. That's a lot of classrooms. I must say this, we would not have enough custodial staff to wipe down every classroom at any given time. So we have to be within reason of how that is being done too. Same thing with the elementary classroom. Right now, we know that pre-K always, no matter what, whether COVID or no COVID, their classrooms are always wiped down.
Right.
In pre-K.
No, I wasn't asking unreasonable. I was just saying who's responsible for it. If it's not Mr. Pepe's people, then who is it? Parents want to know.
So from my perspective, we'll get back to you with that as soon as we work out the logistics. But from being a school principal, I know, and being a teacher in the classroom, I know I used to clean down my own place. Because that's my little house where I live for this short period of time.
I understand that, but in a time such as this, we need to have something that says this is what happens, because not everyone's going to be like you, right?
We'll get back to it. We'll make sure that is
okay. Thank you. And then my next question, Dr. Tracy, is around transportation. I heard the transportation representative say that the buses will be. Did he say they will be filtered? almost to capacity. But then I'm reading that in the documents that there's 1 kid per seat. I saw that, and I saw it in the pictures, and then I saw it in the athletics literature.
So Dr. Jackson, I could answer that too. That was summer, that was a summer suggestion. Since then, that has changed.
Okay, so the document that people are reading and that they're printing off says one athlete per seat, and then the picture shows 1 kid per seat. So what will it be?
The buses, Mr. Pinto, go ahead.
Let me answer, because Paul was actually on vacation, so I let him take off and go back to his vacation home in Maine. As it stands now, under the low risk of transmission, buses will be operating at full capacity. We'll have masks. Masks will be mandatory, and we will modify how kids get on the bus. Obviously, so the first kid on will load all the way to the back. However, we'll be at full capacity. So, and then we will load progressively from back to front. And then when we disembark, they will disembark from front to back. If we move to a moderate transmission or a moderate risk environment, then we will have to decrease the capacity of buses at that point. And that's where the imagery was depicting the moderate transmission, where if we have to move to a decreased capacity.
Okay. So my question is, okay, so we're at low risk right now?
We're at moderate risk.
We're at moderate risk. So what are the buses at moderate risk? Because you just said, Mr. Pinto, low risk. I'm just confused. How are the buses going to be populated?
If we have to go to, well,
we're at moderate risk.
We're waiting for the determination from the health department. Our planning was for opening, unless if we're at moderate.
No,
risk,
we're at moderate risk right now. So what is the moderate?
The moderate risk is for reduced if we are directed to open with a moderate risk, we'll have to have reduced capacity on the buses.
So what is the moderate risk, reduced capacity? Because right now we're at moderate risk.
We're still working through the details.
But I'm just saying, parents want to understand, and we're trying to, this is what this meeting was about. We're at moderate risk. We should know about what the buses are going to be like at moderate risk. What would that look like?
If we have to, we'll be one kid per seat.
Okay. So I just want answers, because I think that's why we had this meeting. We're at moderate risk. What is the definition of moderate risk on the bus? Is there one?
And that's why we send information to the state about if we have to double up transportation, what the cost would be. We send preliminary costs to the state about what these things would look like if we have to double up transportation to do some of the things that we need to do. And so that's why there's a cost analysis that was done, that if this is a model that we are told we have to follow.
But Dr. Tracy, so I'm just asking I'm asking the question. There's low risk, moderate risk, and then the severe risk. I'm just asking Mr. Pinto, what is the model on the bus for low risk? What is the model on the bus for moderate risk? At this point, we are moderate risk. And I think it's a fair question to ask with over 497 people on this call. What is a moderate risk bus transportation supposed to look like?
Approximately 50% capacity.
50%. So what does that mean? One person per seat, or what is that on a bus? And if that's the case,
yes.
So then, okay. So then so if that is the case, since we are at 50%, then what do we prepare parents around that? How do you do that? Are there multiple pickups? What if somebody can't bring someone to school? How does that work? Because now we're at moderate risk.
For families to be very supportive of what's going on because of the costs associated with that. If possible, you can transport your students to school We do not have to use the bus. We're asking for support. I ended with seeking support from communities, seeking support from the families, because if we have to go, if we have to do this moderate risk, whatever it is,
Right. Yeah.
we have to make sure that we practice the social distancing that is asked for, supported
So
by.
how do parents prepare, Dr. Tracy, for a moderate risk bus situation? And the reason why I'm really stuck in this, remember last year we had the fiasco. We never really got through that. We were still really reeling from that. We remember how hard we worked with that. So now we never finished, we never ironed that out completely. So now we're going into pandemic, which is moderate risk. What should parents expect around transportation with a moderate risk?
Please connect that to the instructional model also, Dr. Jackson. So in the moderate risk, if we go to the moderate risk instructional model, it means that less students will be coming to school. Therefore, less students will be on bus.
So how will we notify them? We just said, and Madam President just agreed, we're at moderate risk. So we're at moderate risk. Exactly. And this call was about everything that you guys said. I loved it, kind of put me in a little bit, I had some questions, but as far as a lot of our kids take buses, they take buses from all the towns surrounding, mostly all the New Haven kids get on a bus. We're at moderate risk.
So I'm directing you to the plan that we have for what we call our hybrid plan. In the hybrid, and that's where bus and everything is connected. If we go to the hybrid plan, we will not have that many students in school because we'll have to strategize, which group of students are coming into school, which group of students are staying in school.
Okay, so when will that go out?
Dr. Jackson, let Dr. Tracy finish her statement.
I just wanted to finish my questions. I mean, I really, because busing is really, really critical here, and we're less than 6 weeks away from school opening. Parents need to understand how their kids are going to get to school. They need to understand what that process is going to be. We do not want busing to happen like it happened last year. And this is no one's fault. The pandemic is no one's fault. I just want to make it very clear on this.
And it will not. And that's why we're engaged in planning, we're engaged in discussion. We're not. Again, I'm going to say, if we go to a moderate, we're giving the state 3 plans, right? If we're using the moderate risk for our academic portion, it follows that the class sizes will be smaller. It follows that the number of students coming into school will be less that we have to plan for. And it follows that parents are selecting whether or not they're coming in person or they want remote learning. All those will factor in. We're going to do another survey to our families around choosing distance learning or being in school, because we have more information now to share with parents what this distance learning will look like. Prior to that, we were only getting a gauge to sense where things are. A survey will be going out to parents. Based on that survey, we'll be able to now to say to our families, grades, what have you, is coming in. This other group is coming in, and staggered days, what have you. That will then decrease automatically the number of students that would be on a bus, period. So a lot of things are, right now we're, Dr. Jackson, this thing is so fluid, and right now today we're here talking. We can hear tomorrow a different set of information. So because no one knows the nature of this virus as it's going on. So we are all planning, and it's our job to share with the board what our thinking is right now. And your questions are point on. I'm not negating your questions.
I get it.
As we get the information that we're going to seek again from parents to now solidify the plans, we will know how we're gauging things. Without the data, without the information, it's hard to say.
Okay, so I just, and transportation last year was, we know it was like the worst ever. So just, that is very, it was, yeah. So let's just, I understand that, but the busing is going to be very tricky. So I want to make sure that that's, front of our list, really. Okay, so let me add one more. for Dr. Tracy, for the professional development that has been going on. It seems very extensive and robust. I want to congratulate you guys in that, because that's exactly what we needed with our teaching, with our people. So was it required? Was there 100% participation by instructional staff, and was it required?
So the first set of professional development that we did before teachers left, we realized, and we heard our parents loud and clear, we realized that because we jumped in at the initial stage without having much of any plan, because we were all thrust into this nationwide, teachers were not prepared, schools were not prepared. They did the best they could. So it was not a very robust type of learning that parents actually received for their students, and we acknowledge that. It's not anyone's fault, because we were thrust into that. Having acknowledged that, the team with Ms. Gums Johnson and Jessica Haxley and other teachers developed a plan where they've taught teachers 2 weeks of training how to use Google Suite that can deliver live instruction to the students. Remember, we didn't do the live instruction because we protect our students. Now, we have trained them in how to use Google Suite to get that live instruction in for our families. We have trained them how to use the tools, how to connect content to what they're doing, to make sure that families have a more robust way of educating their kids or supporting the education of their kids. The other one that Ms. Hannons had engaged in that we authorized was the Link Spring one, where we believe now that we're thrust into this, teachers need to have a knowledge of what blended learning classrooms look like. And so we invested in that. The administrators are trained, and now coming up in a few days, teachers will be trained in doing that. So in the event something happened, God forbid, I'm hoping not, in the event something happens, then our teachers are ready to give our families the best and meaningful professional support in learning that they can.
So what was the percentage of participation from your teaching staff in the things that Ms. Gomes Johnson spoke of?
I think there was almost 100% participation, because they were in school. The ones that's coming up in the summer, I'm not sure yet of the level of participation that will be there, but the ones we did before school was out, the teachers participated.
Ms. Hannons.
Okay, thank you. That finishes my questions for now. And I wanted to say thank you very much, Dr. Tracy. I know everybody worked really hard. I appreciate all the hard work from the staff. I really do. Thank you so much.
But the questions are legitimate, so
thank you
for raising the questions.
Thank you. Ms. Hannons, and then Dr. Joyner. I'm guessing Ms. Hannons had additional.
I just would add, for the summer institutes, Dr. Jackson, you inquired around if they were mandatory for teachers. They were not mandatory for teachers. However, principals identified at least 3 teachers in every school, and in our largest schools, as many as 5 teachers, as well as the curriculum supervisors identify coaches to participate in the summer institutes. The institutes are recorded, so all of our teachers will have access to the recorded institutes that are occurring right now and will occur this summer, and then they will have also access to the 150 hours of virtual PD.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hannons. Dr. Joyner?
Actually, I have 1 comment and 2 questions, and I will give you a chance to answer. The comment is that based on the previous questions, and based on the real outstanding presentation that you guys gave, it was carefully orchestrated. It took into account the varied expertise in the district. You didn't have Dr. Tracy acting like President Trump and interrupting people and whatever. She actually commissioned people who have phenomenal expertise, and she gave them a chance to do their job. And that's the way you run a great organization. I mean, you can't have tenors singing alto and alto singing bass and all that stuff. You have to have everybody singing their voice. So it was great. The other thing is that she actually created, and her team created, a principle that if you do it right, it allows any organization to function well. If you do it wrong, it sabotages an organization. And what she did is, she identified the trigger. Then she developed a couple of if-then scenarios that would be responsive to what the trigger does. And the thing about it is that COVID-19 is not political, it's not religious, it's not any of those. It's a killing machine. And when it's triggered at a very high level, that requires one response. When it's triggered at a very moderate level, that requires another response. When it's triggered at a low level, it requires another response. What she has done is she has identified the most scientifically known responses to those three scenarios. And I say known because we don't know yet everything. For instance, some research suggests that kids over 10 are really good transmitters of this disease. And that would have implications for schooling as well. So the trigger is the rate of infection and transmission, and it requires a response consistent with the best science. And that's the only way you can handle it. Now, as far as in-classroom sanitation, one of the things that compliance does in the classroom, if every kid wears a mask, if every kid washes or uses what have you, then it reduces the likelihood that there will be a substantial amount of virus in the classroom. And the reason that you can't have people going in and out of classrooms cleaning during the time the class is in session is because it really undermines what you're doing in the first place by having kids in school so they can learn. If you're teaching a classroom and people are in and out, then that disrupts the attention of the students as well as the focus of the teacher. I know that because I've taught thousands of classrooms. And I realize how important order and stability are to a classroom being effective, as well as the emotional state of the kids and so on and so forth. I mean, I'll tell you something about the fear that I had when I was a little boy about being blown up by an atomic bomb. And we had, in the schools, we would have drills and what have you. And as a little 7 or 8 year old, I was just, oh my God, they're gonna blow us up and there's nothing we can do about it. Now, imagine that was not it was a possibility, but there was nothing tangible about it. Thankfully, people got enough intelligence to create mutually assured destruction policies and what have you. But these kids have seen the death, destruction, and carnage that has happened in this country. And older kids that are intelligent enough have seen the stupidity of the people that we elected to serve us. I'm not talking about local leadership, and I'm not talking about our governor, but I'm talking about people in other places who think you can actually put a light inside somebody and kill the disease, or they can drink some disinfectant and kill the disease. I mean, if somebody told me someone would say that, I said, no, that's not, that would never happen. Second thing of the question. So I'm done with that comment. The trigger is the rate of infection. And I am very comfortable with the scientific responses you guys have come to that. And since you have this sort of mindset, I suspect that as you know more, you'll do more. Because clearly, this school system is a learning organization with very bright, diverse people who understand something about logical thinking as opposed to mystical thinking or hopeful thinking. Now, my two questions. I was intrigued by the Zuno Z7-1 and the fact that it is almost like an adhesive, if you will, that says to COVID-19, hey, bro, you can't hang here. You will not live in this environment. And I'm just wondering, I'm not going to ask that question about can you inject somebody with it, but I'm just wondering if it can be used before the kids come to school in classroom without any damage to the people in the classroom. Because if it can be used, it seems to me that it would be one other barrier to large transmission effect. I don't know, so I'm asking the question, and I'm not going to. I'll just let. Hopefully, sometime you don't have to answer now. answer it later. And then the second question is that if you watch the news, the biggest problem across the country, and the reason that we have so much uneven levels of transmission, is because people are acting stupid. They're having COVID-19 parties. They're not wearing masks. They get mad at people at Home Depot and Lowe's because they're wearing, I don't have to wear a mask, it's my right. Well, you also have a responsibility. What are we gonna do in our schools? And you don't have to answer it. You can answer it later. To deal with people who are aggressively non-compliant. Because quite frankly, even without this virus, and Mr. Conaway, if you can say an amen, I appreciate it. But we have had, as school leaders and teachers, we have had people who are totally unreasonable that we have to spend a lot of time with to say, you cannot come in here and slap somebody, or you cannot do this, or you cannot say this, or whatever. And so we're going to have a concerted response in order to protect all of us to people who are willfully or even unwillfully not complying with reasonable demands to protect themselves and all of us. And that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Dr. John.
Yeah, I'm the
Thank you,
other
Dr. Joyner.
I'm the old Dr. J.
And the matter of, the COVID-19 does not negate disciplinary plans that are already in place for schools.
Mm-hmm.
So schools will have to revert to whatever disciplinary plans they have if a child misbehaves the same thing. So that I'm going to say that. The other one about that cleaning agent, from my understanding, it was for the bus.
Mm-hmm.
For the bus that can stay on surface for a long time without having to be spraying every day. If that is something that we invest in, probably can use for the school just the same way. I understand from the information I received was that it has ingredients that of vitamin C. So it's not harmful to children. So that's a little knowledge that I gained from that after investigating.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. I'm just going to ask 2 questions, and then Mr. Golson, you can go. My other questions were asked by Dr. Jackson, so I should be short. In terms of the distance learning, I know that we're going one-to-one with the Chromebooks. What are we doing about addressing the Wi-Fi concerns that some of our students have? Or is there anything we can do?
Let me have Mr. Penn.
Mr. Penn.
Thank you, Madam President. Actually, there is a corollary project that is going on right now that ties into the one-to-one device initiative, where we're creating what's called a mesh Wi-Fi network, where effectively we're putting Wi-Fi broadcast antennas on the exterior of our school buildings and our least served communities for Wi-Fi access. Mm-hmm. And the plan is to have that in place by the time school starts back up. Because you're 100% right. If we give students a device and don't give them a means of connectivity, it's like having a brick sit on your desk. It's not going to be of much value to you.
A nice paperweight.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. And then for my second question, in terms of signage, Mr. Barbarata mentioned signage, and someone else did as well. I don't remember who it was. Is that signage also going to be in other languages like Arabic, Spanish, or whatever other languages we speak in our schools?
Yes. From my understanding, President Rivera, as many languages as we can possibly get them in. We have a lot of languages in New Haven. So where, for example, if in my building, a lot of students speak Pashto, whatever they call it, then that school will get that type of signage. So you want to make a lot of signage that in my building, I don't need that. If I'm predominantly Latino, Latina, then we have to make sure that building has a lot in Spanish. That's the way we're working the signage.
Got it. Makes sense. Mr. Barbarata?
I just wanted to add that in addition to different languages, we're required to have some ADA signage also. Some of this will have that information also.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Tracy, what day is school scheduled to open?
So originally, we were scheduled to open on August 34th for students, August 31st for students. We received some information from the state that we can have a waiver to have school 177 days for students, to give teachers an extra 3 days with their buildings to make the ample preparation they need to make. Because right now they're on break, but to come in and make proper preparation for their students. And so that's 3 days that will be taken out of the students' day year and give them 177 school days instead. So that means it would be, I don't have the calendar in front of me, but I'm getting information out to parents about that. We have to ask the state for a waiver for us to be allowed to do that, from my understanding, speaking to a superintendent's group this morning. So we can ask for the waiver to push it down to 177 days. That means we'll start a couple of days before, and then it's before Labor Day?
September 3rd.
September what?
3rd.
September 3rd instead, it would push the school start date up to September 3rd.
Thank you very much. I think the how we just got that answer is indicative of what Dr. Jackson was highlighting earlier, is that those kind of simple questions haven't been answered for both the board members and for the public. I mean, we just found out today, just a few minutes ago, just now, that schools are opening September 3rd. And so I'm assuming that is the date now, right? That parents could count a school being started on September 3rd, whether it's distant learning, whether it's in the classroom, whatever. Is that correct?
So if we, as a system, apply for the waiver, that information just came down to us, Mr. Golson, and I sent it out to the board to say that's a consideration. I sent it in the board information. That's a consideration. I did not yet share it out with my families because we'll have to get a waiver in order to do that.
Okay, so it's either August 31st or September 3rd.
Yes.
Okay, that would be good to have that in the plan that you put together for school opening.
Pre-K and readiness students will have a different starting date. That will be sent out by the early childhood department.
Okay,
They
now
all have a different starting date anyhow.
Now, I heard you say at the beginning of the presentation that you have to get your plan with the 3 different options to the state by July 24th. Is that correct?
Hold on, Mr. Golson. I got a little distracted here. They have to move my car.
Okay.
Before we get locked out of the garage. Hold on. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Is she going to the garage or is she having someone do it?
Oh, she's giving someone the keys.
Okay. I'm like, that's going to be a while.
The gentleman has to leave at a certain time in the garage.
Okay.
Got it.
All right, let me repeat my question to you, Dr. Tracy. I think I heard you say at the beginning of this presentation that your plan, which includes the low, moderate, and high options, are due to the state on the 24th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is the process after it gets to the state? Does the state get back to you and say, this is what you have to do? Or does the state get back to you and say, depending on your circuit, because we have 169 different municipalities and a bunch of different school systems. So are all school systems going to be held to the same standard, or is there going to be, is each school system going to be able to tailor their opening based on what's happening in their towns?
So if I attempt to answer that, from my understanding, all school systems have to present the 3 plans to the state.
I understand that.
Yes, and what they will do with that, I am not sure, but all school systems present 3 plans. What they want is that we afford parents the opportunity of coming back to school with their students in person. That's their preferred plan. I am not sure yet whether or not they're gonna ask the local municipality, local school board to weigh in on this. I'll have better answer with that, Mr. Golson. I have a meeting with state folks tomorrow around this very thing, because they're supporting school districts individually. So, but they asked all of us to prepare 3 plans.
So the answer is we do not know yet if the state is going to allow each municipality to make a final decision on how it opens based on its individual circumstances.
That's correct.
Do we know when that decision is going to be made? When we're going to know that information?
Very, very soon. I think before, what did they say? By August? By August 1st? By the first week in August, something like that. As I was listening, don't hold me to that totally. That's what I thought I heard, by the first week of August, as soon as all the plans go in to the state.
Okay. Now the different types of openings are based on based on information that we receive from the health department, I assume. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Whether we're low, moderate, or high is determined by the state or the local health department.
The state along with the local health department.
So each local health department is going to determine what. I'm sorry, what's that?
As a Director Bond, let me have her answer that one.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, so Dr. Tracy is correct. The Department of Public Health will be developing specific metrics to assist local officials with providing support to the schools that that are under our jurisdictions.
All right, so when is that information going to be made available? What is the date that we make the decision whether we're low, because we can't wait until the day before school opens to make that decision, right? So
Correct.
What is the date where we decide based on the DHP information? DHP, I'm assuming the state.
DPH.
DPH, the State Department of Health, is that correct?
Correct. And we have ongoing meetings and convening about the different plans. So as soon as they issue the plan, we will certainly make you all abreast of that information. So I will convene with Dr. Tracy so that we can reconvene with this team to provide that information.
Well, the point I'm trying to get to again is a point that Dr. Jackson was raising and originally, and that is, when will we know? When are we going to say, okay, today is the day that we make the decision? Is it going to be August 1st? Is it going to be August 15th? Is it all going to be August 31st? What is the date that we're going to set up for ourselves to say, okay, these are the metrics we got from DPH, and this is how we're going to open? Because again, we're all board members and parents alike don't know, and apparently you don't know either because it's still up in the air. So can we give everyone a date that we say, okay, this is a date where we decide what risk factor we are, and this is how school is going to open?
So, Mr. Golson, if I should answer that, that's why the 3 plans are if then. If this happens tomorrow or the next 2 days or 3 days, you may hear that there are more virus spread in the community in New Haven. And if I say today to you, we're going to go with a moderate plan, for all I hear, or the health data may prove me wrong, and we have to switch to a different plan. We may have to go to a full remote learning with everybody, like we did last time. So the health data will dictate where we are. And that's why I think they're holding on from saying, oh, this is the plan New Haven is going with, we're going on that plan. We have to present 3 if-then plans.
Dr. Tracy, I'm not suggesting today that we have to know which one of those plans we're going to use. What I'm asking you is, what is the drop dead date when we make that decision? Is it August 1st? Is it August 15th? Is it August 31st? When are we going to say, okay, parents, this is the date that we're going to make a decision as to what, this is the date that we're going to make a decision based on that current information from DPH? I mean, it can't be August 31st, right? I mean,
it's not going to be August 31st. And I will defer that to my team because I convene with them tomorrow, and I will raise that question. And then we will pass that information so that the board can have an update. Obviously, we want to make sure that the parents and everyone is are able to plan. We are monitoring the daily trends, both locally, regionally, statewide, and nationally. And so there are a lot of different moving pieces. The plans were just submitted to the state from the Commissioner of Education. So there's also their end. And so they're convening at the state level. So as soon as they provide us an update, we will ensure that that communication goes down the pipeline.
I understand that, and thank you for that answer. Again, the sooner the better, obviously, because as Dr. Jackson again raised, busing could be a disaster if we wait to the last minute to inform parents when their kids are catching buses,
Agreed.
where they're catching buses, and the whole bit. So I'd like to see that information as soon as possible. Second question I have is there going to be Google Classroom training for parents also?
That is something that we can look into because we want to make sure our parents are properly trained with that, and that offering will be available.
Yes.
Yes.
When will that training occur? Do you have any sense of when that will happen?
Timeline. I don't have the timeline with us right now, so when that is happening, we're making sure that first our teachers are trained, and so they can also help with the training of our parents.
All right. I got a couple of more quick questions. In terms of the transportation, you suggested that reduced capacity means more, well, that we may have reduced capacity on buses, which means more buses, which cost more money. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I saw in your presentation that this COVID cost may be somewhere upwards of $13 million.
Projected.
Right, and we know that we got $8 million from CARES. We know that we already have a, I don't know, $8 or $9 million deficit this year, or something's changed. It's okay. Mr. Penn is shaking his head no, so I guess it's lower. But we know that we still have a deficit, I assume, this year. Is that correct? No, so we got rid of the deficit. That's great. So this $13 million we do not have at this point, right? We have maybe 8 of it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Penn, go ahead. You can respond.
Yeah, so the mitigation actions that the board took at one of their recent meetings was intended to close that deficit.
Yeah.
But more importantly, out of the 13.9 million, we have about 8.4 available to us under the CARES Act. So it's the balance between the two, the 5.5 million that we needed some other means of funding.
All right. Okay, so you said 5 million is still unaccounted for at this point?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. I just have 2 more quick questions. One is with this transportation, loading to the front to the back and unloading from the back to the front. I don't understand that whole concept. How does that protect children?
Mr. Pinto.
Mr. Pinto, go ahead.
The concept is that the kids pass by each other less. So the first kid on obviously passes, so you're passing the fewest number. Well, you're not actually passing anyone. So you have less likely, if there was someone who was infected, you have less likelihood of transmitting.
All right, so there's no one who's actually standing at the buses when these kids are loading and unloading well, maybe unloading, there might be people who were there at the schools, but when these kids are loading onto the bus, each of these buses have a bus monitor now that will be handling how they load and how they social distance during the bus rides?
There won't be there may be some additional bus monitors, but there won't be a bus monitor on every single bus. No.
Okay.
However, kids will be instructed, and this is where we need the community to assist, directing kids when they get on the bus to load all the way to the back to the furthest back available seat. If you're the first kid on, you go all the way to the back. The next kids go to the third kid on goes to the next row.
Listen, you know as well as I know, these kids, when they're getting on the bus, they're tussling with each other and they're trying to figure out who's going to get on first. And I mean, and it's going to be a whole lot touchy feeling stuff that's going on, but that's a whole different issue. But it's not going to be monitored as well as we hoped it would be. Okay, the other question I have is around. It's not really a question; it's more of a comment. And Dr. Joyner said he was intrigued by this Zuni Z71 or whatever it is. I'm intrigued, but I'm intrigued for a different reason. We are about to inject a lot of chemicals around our children. We're injecting chemicals on the buses. We're injecting chemicals in the school. We're injecting chemicals all over the place to try to keep them from being infected by COVID. But I'm wondering, I'm concerned about what the long-term health effects might be on these children. And I know, someone mentioned that they said that it's, it's like vitamin C or something, but it's always a good product until it's not a good product. And we may not even find for 5 or 10 years from now that all of those chemicals floating around these schools now are might be more dangerous than the actual COVID. That we're trying to stop it. So I'm still a little concerned about that. All of these newfangled disinfectants are coming out of the woodworks, and I don't know if they've been tested to the point where we know the long-term effects they have on especially children. And my last question is around this. There was some mention earlier that teachers will probably be responsible for cleaning their classes before the end of the day, during the day. Now, we all know that teachers already have a limited amount of time to spend with their children actually teaching. So now we're going to be taking from them a few more minutes, which really makes a difference in a class that's only 20 to 25 minutes, a few more minutes of their time to disinfect and wipe down and do all this stuff in the classrooms. 2 questions I have. Well, one question I have related to that is, have we had a conversation with the teachers union, and have they agreed that their members will be doing this kind of cleaning, and has this information been passed down to their members and the principals in those schools? Dr. Tracy,
Let me say, yes, I hear you, Mr. Golson. I made that suggestion just, on this talk right now. We do not have in our plan to say teachers clean down their classroom. The question was asked, and so I say that. The teachers union, 4 major unions have been involved in all our planning. Down to the minutia around who's going to clean inside the teacher's classroom. We do not have that necessarily in our plan. We have in our plan where we'll clean at the end of each day the classrooms. And as someone mentioned, if students engage in, frequent hand washing with soap and water, or even hand sanitizers if there's no soap or water nearby, then quite likely the students are clean spaces wearing their masks. Classrooms are basically clean spaces. I mentioned that I know that in the pre-K area, paraprofessionals always clean down the pre-K classrooms. Always. At least when I was a principal, always. They clean down, the teachers and the paras clean down their classroom tables for their children.
Dr. Tracy, I understand that, but you have 20 kids who are coming into a classroom who are touching their mouths, coughing into their hands, touching each other, and then touching the surfaces. And that's just the first class. I mean, you have 4 or 5 classes in that classroom. That's going on all day. Dr. Jackson asked a very specific question. Who's going to be responsible for making sure that those classrooms are disinfected during that entire day? We thought we heard the answer that the teachers were. Now we're hearing the answer that we don't know yet. It's not part of the plan, right?
I said I took the responsibility. So I mentioned that.
So that's not part of, but you said it's not part of the plan yet.
It was not.
So when is it going to be part of the plan? When?
May I turn the question to you, Mr. Gold?
I'm sorry. Yes, please.
As a board member, what would you suggest?
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm only asking questions.
What we do.
I have a suggestion.
Wait a minute.
Hold on, Mr. Conway. Hold on.
Dr. Tracy, I'm going to.
Suggestion. That's what I'm asking.
Dr. Tracy, Dr. Tracy, I'm going to end my questioning now because there are other board members that do have suggestions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Ms.
Thank you, Mr. Golson. Mr. Conway?
I would suggest that the teachers and the parents be allowed to wear scrubs. That's taking place around the country. So that as part of that PPE materials, scrubs should be included in that as well. That's one thing. Teachers have been asking me about that, and administrators. They said to bring that up, so I'm bringing that up. Scrubs. The second thing, Dr. Tracy, I think that your team did a good job in the presentation. I feel a lot more comfortable. But one thing I think Dr. Jackson was really drilling down on some questions, and I think those need to be answered. And then the last thing for Dr. Bond, I hope by August 15th we're able to have an answer on whether we're going to go moderate, high, or low. I think August 15th is a good cutoff date to begin to let parents know. We should drill down on that.
Point taken.
Okay, thank you. Those are my two comments: scrubs and a date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Mr. Barbarotta?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Mr. Golson's previous question, not the last one. It's a good question. I don't have the answer to the long-range effects of the chemicals. I will tell you that the Board of Ed follows a state mandated green cleaning program. Most of the chemicals that we use are hydrogen peroxide based. They're the same things that you use to clean out a cut. You know, for the COVID thing, there was an order that came down for a while that said you didn't have to follow the green cleaning thing. So there's been some bleach introduced to some of the schools and that stuff. And we're trying to get that thing back out and go back to following our green cleaning program.
Thank you, Mr. Barbarotta.
Thank you, and Madam Chair.
Mayor Elicker? Oh,
Part of the reason we're presenting this plan is not just to get questions, but also to solicit support. If you have suggestions, because we may not be able to think of everything. We have been looking at this document for so long that we may have missed out things. If you have suggestions, parents who are listening to us out there, please send us some suggestions your way, and you'll see how we can incorporate those suggestions into our plan. The plan, majority of the plan has been online seeking for feedback. We've not gotten a lot of feedback, and maybe the document was so cumbersome. We did not get a lot of feedback. But my objective here is that we present, please share with us, anybody, board members, families, share with us some feedback, react to the plan. React to the plan, please. I would really appreciate that, and my team would appreciate that.
thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mayor Elicker?
Thank you, Dr. Tracy, and to the team for spending so much time and effort on this presentation. And thank you to Dr. Jackson, who suggested this in the first place. It's clear that with 400 people on this call, there's a lot of interest in this. And I just want to respond to one thing, and there's a lot of other questions in the comments that I'm not sure if the plan is to answer them now or later, but there's some pretty good questions in the comments. I think it's important, we're starting to get used to the new world, but the new world is changing and changing and changing still. And I do think it's important for people, I understand people really, really want certainty. And, you know, as a parent myself, I want to know, is my daughter going to school or not? What time's the bus coming? How am I going to tell her how to get on the bus? You know, all these details. I also think we have to accept the reality that it's possible 2 weeks into school, we could have a spike in cases and we might have to change course and go to a different level. And while none of us want that, all of us want certainty. We want to know which direction we're headed in. And I think that, you know, our health department has heard loud and clear that as much as possible, we want to make a decision about which level we're going to be at and you know, whether we're going 5 days or 2 days a week to school. I think it's really important to remind everyone that this is inherently uncertain, and we may need to change course even last minute. And so people want certainty, but we got to remain flexible too.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Elicker. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. I think everyone in this city is clear that this is an uncertain situation. I mean, I just went to the grocery store today. They closed off one entrance like they did at the beginning of this process because there was a spike in COVID cases. So we know that this could change daily and weekly. And quite frankly, if you can't make a decision until August 31st, then you can't make a decision until August 31st. We just want to know what that date is that you're going to make the decision. We want to be certain that you're going to be making a decision, you're going to be making a decision at some date. And if it ain't if it's not till August 31st, then fine, then tell us that. So it's not unfair for board members and parents to be asking these questions. I think because they ask the questions doesn't mean that they're impatient. Our teachers are just as up in the air, if not more than anyone else. I'm seeing comments where they're saying now, oh, we didn't know we were going to be responsible for cleaning the classes. How does that happen? Sometimes there's 3 people who I'm using the classes. So, we get more questions as these presentations get done. And by the way, it was a very good presentation. I mean, it raised a lot of issues, and I thank you for that. And I feel a little more comfortable that we are going in a direction that you guys are working really hard to get us to where we need to be. And I also understand that sometimes we can't get the answers we want when we want them. But a lot of when we can't get them, we like to know when we will be able to get them. And that is what I think Dr. Jackson was leading to, because she's getting a lot of input from parents. That's what I'm getting to, because I'm getting a lot of input from parents. And if you see these 67 questions on the question and answer tab down there, that's what a lot of other people who are getting to. And I hope that we answer all of those questions, by the way. I hope that before this process is over, those 67 questions are answered for those people who had the time, who took the time to type in those questions in the question and answer section. Is there someone who's responsible for doing that, Dr. Jackson? Because that's feedback that you're asking for, by the way.
You're asking me, Darnell?
No, I meant Dr. Tracy, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
All these doctors.
That is Mr. Golson. So let me clarify. Right now, for the teacher's contract and the calendar that was issued, it says school begins for students August 31st. I must say that. That was a calendar that we voted on that says school would begin on August 31st. Okay. I also said that just recently, I heard from the state that if we apply for a waiver, we can begin school a little later by giving teachers enough time for preparation.
Yes.
Students back in. Therefore, that would put us at September 3rd if we get the waiver. Those information just came to us. So I need to clarify that point. We knew when school was starting. As to the plan to be used, we've got to wait on health information that's coming to us, or which plan New Haven is going to use. That's why we are asked to prepare 3 plans, period. Then, based on health data and our local health information, we will share with parents which of the plans we're going with. But already, the reason for planning is that you'll have everything set in motion for whatever plans we have to go to.
I understand that. I do. I applaud you. I applaud you on having the different levels and the different options available. Again, I think, and I don't want to rehash this all over again. Again, the only question is, I think, and Mr. Conaway made a very good point, a very good comment, and that is he would like to see August 15th as the cutoff for when this decision is made. I would like to see that too. I would suspect that there are a couple of other board members that would like to see a cutoff date where we say, okay, this is where we're going now. Of course, it could change. It could change a week after school opens. But this is what our plan is right now. We no longer have 3 options. This is the plan until the circumstances change. And we'd just like to know when that date is. August 15th is good with me. I guess at the state, a lot of it depends on the state. Again, the question I did ask you was, who's going to answer these questions that are posted in the question and answer section here on the website? Well, first, are they going to be answered? And if so, who's going to answer them? And when are they going to be responded to? and how?
We will take a shot at looking at the questions. If there are questions that have been answered, we won't repeat. If there are questions that have not been answered, then we'll surely answer, as we've been doing when we have the parent Zoom. We've answered the questions that were asked.
And when are they going to
be posted?
And they'll be posted.
They'll be posted along with the recording of this meeting, the answers to the questions that we do have.
Thank you. That's a very definitive answer. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
White. Thank you, President, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Mayor Elicker, you had raised your hand. I'm not sure if you were still.
Sure, I just wanted to, just to clarify, to comment Mr. Goldson made, I'm not sure if he was referring to me, but I did not say that people were being unfair or impatient. I understand, just to clarify, so I understand that people want some certainty around it. Just reminding people to know that things might change.
That wasn't directed to you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor
Mayor.
Elicker.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson.
Dr. Jackson?
Yes, I just have a comment. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate all the hard work that they've put into this. And like Dr. Tracy said, we are all in this together. I have a comment just around an article that I read today that in Forbes that was heralded from the Harvard Global Health Institute as one of the best studies we've had to date on the issue of COVID spread with youth. They had a sample size of about 5,000 kids in North Korea, and it talked about, the study found that young people between the ages of 10 to 19 were not often the first in their households to show symptoms, but when they were 18, almost 20% of their contacts contracted the disease. So this, if anyone could go and read this article, it's really enlightening. It's brand new, it's hot off the press, that children do spread the disease, and we have to understand that. So we can't keep going on the premise of, they're not getting it, they're not spreading it. They can get it, they can spread it. They just don't get as serious of manifestations of the symptoms. But the people they come in contact with are the ones that get the more serious of the manifestations of the symptoms. So I just wanted to I don't want us to keep saying, oh, they're not, they're so safe. They're not. So we need to understand that they have the same chances of contracting it. It's just that they don't get as sick, but they will spread it. So we have to be very, very clear about the precautions we're taking. The question about who's cleaning the classrooms, that's something that parents want to know. I'm sure I'm not the only one that got this, that read this today. We just want to know simple answers around, you guys handle all of the intricate stuff, all of the curriculums and the ways they're teaching, the social emotional learning, the disengaged youth, that right there is key also. No one can do that but you. But the questions that parents have, like I'm a parent, how are the simple things going to happen? How is my kid going to get on the bus? How is my kid going to stay safe on the bus? How is my kid going to stay safe in the school, in the classroom? Who's going to clean? So when I ask those questions, it's because of things that I've read, which are legitimate sources, and questions that other parents also have. So we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Mr. Goldson.
Thank you. One more question. Well, actually two questions, Madam President. Will we have another session like this before the final decision is made as to how we're opening? And it should be probably separate from our regular meeting, because we just don't have enough time during the regular meeting to get to what we already get to. So will we have another meeting like this? And secondly, when school starts, if we have decided to send kids back to schools, will we start meeting in person again?
That would make sense, because why would we be hiding behind Zoom when we're sending our kids?
That question wasn't actually for you, Dr. Tracy, because it was actually for the board president.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was.
No.
Sorry.
So in terms of having another meeting like this, again, yeah, we can schedule that if we think it's needed. And then in terms of meeting in person, I don't see why we can't meet in person if the schools are open.
Okay, thank you.
Unless they tell us we shouldn't for some reason.
Okay, Madam President, thank you.
Will we have an option to video, to be on video?
That I don't know. I think if we're gonna have the meeting in person, then we have them in person, and if we're gonna have them in video, then we all have them by video. So I don't know. We'll I guess we can talk about it more as we get closer. Dr. Joyner?
I think it's more important that Dr. Tracy has a meeting with the community to answer some of these questions that are coming out, and we're not in the way. We can always get answers ourselves, I believe. So I think if the superintendent and her staff could have a community meeting and to be able to answer some of these specific questions, I think that would be helpful. Even if it's in addition to anything that we do.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Bolton, and then Dr. Jackson, and then I want us to get to public participation.
Yes. 2 points. One is our bylaws allow for us to have meetings, but also allow in-person meetings, but also allows for some members to call in electronically if they have to. So I think the answer to Dr. Jackson's question is yes. If someone doesn't want to participate because they're still afraid of COVID, they can participate electronically. There's certain rules that you have to follow, but yes, they can. Secondly, in terms of the response from Dr. Joyner, I would assume that at the end of the day, the board will have to actually approve whatever plan we decide to do to open, right? I mean, there has to be some sort of board approval to that process, I would imagine.
That
would happen at a full board meeting.
Yeah, I didn't ask that question.
No. The question I asked is, are we going to have another meeting like this to hash out these issues? I'm also assuming that would be a meeting where we would make the final approval to what the opening will be, how the opening will occur. So.
Yeah, the answer was we can. If we think it's needed, then we can schedule another meeting like this.
And just to be clear, I was simply asking that Dr. Tracy have a community meeting with staff so that a lot of the questions, I'll look at the questions as well. And Dr. Jackson had legitimate doctor-oriented, parent-oriented questions. I don't think anybody's debating that. Unfortunately, some of these questions we don't have answers for yet because of the dynamics of the disease. And so if we could answer the ones that we can answer in the time that we can answer them, which is really important because it could change in the next 12 hours, unfortunately. It's like trying to have a picnic and you had a good weather forecast, and then all of a sudden there was a storm coming in, and so you couldn't have the picnic. This disease is even worse than that. So that's all I was saying.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Tracy, and then Dr. Jackson.
So let me say this, and thank you everyone for chiming in. Let me say this too, that we have had 2 major meetings with our families. One of them was 500 registrants one day, the other one was 400 something. We've had around our plan. But Dr. Jackson asked to have a meeting with the board, and we send out robocalls to our families also to invite them to listening on this board meeting also. So that would be like the 3rd meeting. But if you believe we need to have more of these, because some of the same questions keep coming up and we keep answering. I also have a family guide that right now I think is being translated. We're going to put on the site. So with frequently asked questions for our families. And some of those questions are extrapolated from questions parents continuously ask that we put in that family guide.
It would be more like updates. I think what happened is that the White House really dropped the ball because they didn't like the answers, so they stopped having updates. Yeah. And we ought to have some type of update on a regular basis to let parents know what's going well, what's not, and what adjustments we're making, so that people are not in a state of confusion. And maybe that wasn't the best term. Updates would be more, and in the case of updates, you can also ask questions.
Dr. Jackson.
I agree with Dr. Joyner, but please don't make it another robocall. We have too many robocalls from the district and the city.
We had one during this meeting.
Yeah, too many. But
they're on that game.
I wanted to make a comment about our meetings. Now, if we need to really think about if we're going to be going back to meeting together, that are we going to allow the public to come, or are they going to watch us? You know, are there going to be other things like taking temperatures? If you read the newspaper today, we have people in our community that hide infections, and now a whole group got infected because someone didn't, because they hid it. And how are we to know, if that's happening and they're coming into a meeting and we're sitting there? That is a risk. Some people are not taking this serious enough. I don't want to risk myself at a meeting because and folks aren't taking this seriously. It's in the newspaper today.
I'm telling you right now, I'm not coming to a meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Neither am I.
I'm a diabetic and I'm 73 years old.
So I don't want, I don't, if the schools are open, which you know how I feel about us open schools, but I don't want to meet in person. People are hiding this thing, and this is what happened. It's in the paper. I don't want to subject myself to that.
Right. And
we don't have to meet in person. We can continue meeting via Zoom. I don't see an issue with that either.
Madam President.
So we can discuss that as we get closer and make a decision.
Madam President, I'll just put on the record, if we're going to vote to send our kids back to school, then we ought to be brave enough ourselves to get into.
It has nothing to do with bravery.
It has a lot to do with bravery.
I don't think there's anybody in this meeting that's any braver.
Dr. Joyner, Dr. Joyner, if we could send our kids to school, we could go to schools. If you want to vote to send our kids to a school, I have a grandson who lives in my house that goes to the school right up the street. So don't tell me.
Okay. Mayor Elicker.
I was going to say
Mr. Conaway.
I was going to say it in a different way, but I do think Mr. Goldston has a point. I think for people that have a medical condition, of course, just like we're giving parents and families the option to do online learning, they should not participate in a Board of Ed meeting if it is their choice not to. But I do think it's consistent for us if we're asking, I'm sending my daughter to school, to public school, but I think it's consistent for us to have an in-person Board of Education meeting if we're expecting children to go to school in person.
I agree with both sides of that.
A lengthy back and forth, but I think it's an important point to make.
No, I agree. I agree with both sides of that.
It has nothing to do with bravery.
Of that discussion. We just have to talk about it a little more and make a final decision.
Protest a little much. I'll protest too much.
All right, you're out of order, Mr. Goldson. Mr. Conaway?
But Dr. Joyner wasn't.
Two comments. Number one, I want to applaud Dr. Tracy and her team for the job that they've done. And the second comment I want to make is I think that we need to cross that bridge about what type of meetings we have when we get to it. We, again, I think this thing changes minute by minute, not hour by hour, not day by day, but minute by minute. And then as we get to low, moderate, or high risk, we can make that decision as to how we're going to meet as a board. And I think people should have options. I support Mayor Ellicker's side. I support Dr. Joyner and Dr. Jackson's side, and I also support what Dr. Goldston did. What Mr. Goldston. We'll cross that bridge. We should cross that bridge, Madam President, when we get there. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Conaway. Dr. Jackson, and then Dr. Tracy.
Yeah, and I just wanted to put it out there that I am choosing distance learning. I know that our mayor, gave his choice, and so Mr. Goldson, I guess that'll let you know how I feel about, some of this. So my children will be doing distance learning. So that's why, I feel like I don't want to do an in-person meeting, right? So
thank you, Dr. Jackson. Dr. Tracy?
So let me say this. It's both and. We have to take care of the families who want distance learning and take care of the families who prefer in-house. That's why there's a choice. There are families who want their children back, and so the side that want distance learning cannot speak for the side that want their children back, vice versa.
Thank you.
If families decide they want their children back, it's incumbent upon us to provide services for them. If families decide to have distance learning, it's incumbent upon us to provide services for the distance learning families. So it's both and when it comes to the school system side. I just need to say that. And so we're planning for whatever scenarios. That's why we say to families, you have an option. You can opt out of in-person, and that's their right. If they opt out, we provide the services for them. But we can't, on either side, make decisions for everybody like that.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you. At the beginning of my comment, I suggested that there were two options for board members that they can make a decision. They could either do the meeting should be an in-school meeting, but board members have the option to do electronically by our bylaws. Secondly, I just want to make the record clear. I have an 8-year-old grandson who lives in my home and goes to the school down the street from my home. So to suggest that I don't have any kids in the system is incorrect. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. All right, so I think with that, we'll go to public participation, and then after that, we can move to adjourn. Dr. White, how many participants do we have for public participation?
At the moment, we have 7 people who have raised hands for participation.
Okay, and then just a reminder, if you use your raise hand feature, you would let.
Yes, we're at 11.
Madam Chair, could I ask Dr.
Ahead,
to keep the timer for me? I'm way overdue for another meeting. And it's an out-of-state organization. So, Dr. Jackson, would you keep time for me? Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Jackson, it's 2 minutes per participant. And then I'll keep time for the hour because we're gonna allow up to an hour of public participation.
So just 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay, the first person being allowed to speak, this is going in the order that they have raised their hands and are on the screen here. Jessica Light, I'm opening her up to, you may speak now.
Hello, I'm Jessica Light, a New Haven teacher, parent, and resident. Thank you, Dr. Tracy, for your incredible leadership during this time. I can tell from your communication that you have been very thoughtful and considering all facets of the school district's path forward with a focus on safety, learning, and inclusion. Every day before my students enter my room, I look them in the eye and welcome them in. This is not just a greeting, but a contract between my students and myself. I will only welcome them into a room that is safe and ready for them. If there is a known danger, I would never tell them to enter. I request you think about school opening the same way. We all have pressures on us from above. Students have pressures from teachers, who have pressures from administrators, who have pressures from central office, who have pressures from the state. And right now, Lamont has put pressure on you to reopen fully because Lamont has people above him pressuring him. But regardless of what plan the state tells us to use, if you think it is unsafe to enter that room, please do not welcome me or my students in. Do not gamble my life on compliance. If we do not have the funds to create a safe physical environment right now, it is okay. We can still teach and learn remotely. One life lost for in-person instruction is too many. Again, thank you for your leadership, and please let me know if there is anything I can do to help with our shared goal of a safe return to learning. Thank you.
Okay, that was just under 2 minutes.
Dr. White, who's the next participant?
Dr. White, you just unmuted me. Am I the next participant? Melody
Yes,
Gallagher?
Melody Gallagher.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Melody Gallagher. I wanted to share an expert of a statement that as of today, 44 NHPS teachers signed and will be sent to the state to address some reopening concerns. As educators, we would like to first acknowledge the hard work that Superintendent Dr. Tracy and the Tiger teams have done to create the plans to reopen our schools as mandated by our governor. some of our concerns with returning to 100% in-person teaching as follows. First, we strongly feel that the lack of outdoor recess, cooperative play, group work, talking, sharing supplies, the confinement of students to one room all day, etc., will do more harm than good. Second, the state needs to provide full funding of all of the funding streams for public schools. New Haven Public Schools remain underfunded to set up for a safe and healthy year ahead. Last, equity is an issue. Students in NHPS are disproportionately affected by high-risk conditions for COVID. Therefore, they should not be in school buildings where they are more at risk. They have caregivers that are essential workers at a disproportionate rate to their peers in other towns. Therefore, caregivers should be financially compensated by the state to stay home with their children during this global pandemic. They are disproportionately without high-speed internet access or devices in the home. Therefore, the state should provide free high-speed internet access for all and devices with processing speeds high enough to handle remote synchronous learning. Funds should be used at this time to create a robust online learning platform to train teachers in remote teaching, to provide students with high-speed internet and devices, and caregivers with the funds to stay home with their children. We can get back a year of academic learning, but we can't get back someone's life. We understand that the district must comply with the state, and therefore we are submitting this for their consideration. Thank you very much.
Right on target time.
The next speaker is M. Elgort. You may speak now. M. Elgort. Ms. Englert, you are unmuted to speak. Okay, I'm moving down to our next speaker, Ms. Elgort.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Mindy Englart. I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, and I'm also on the Tiger team. Thank you so much to the mayor and the superintendent. I have so much respect for you and the board members tonight for all the really good questions. My main concern is that I feel that COVID-19 is not an individual health issue, it's a public health issue. So it seems to me that OSHA, per original CDC COVID-related guidelines for return to school buildings, should be the arbitrator of the decision as to when requirements have been met to keep both children and adults safe. For example, the New Haven Health Department rates restaurants in the city. When a restaurant has failed particular health code requirements, it's shut down until the owners have remediated the issues. I think it should be the same with schools at this time. As each school meets objective science-based requirements, they should reopen and people will accordingly have the confidence to return. If schools do not adhere to strict health code requirements at this time, I fear the district would be opening itself to lawsuits by students and adults who meet with bad health outcomes that they believe were preventable. At this time, teachers who fear for their health must actually fill out ADA disability forms, but many teachers have health issues that are not disabilities. That is, health issues such as diabetes and hypertension do not get in the way of the job of teaching. Therefore, it doesn't really make sense for individual teachers to fill out ADA forms and for a team of people to decide if they pass. I think this would cost unnecessary time, money, and stress. And I think it's the wrong model because I do think that OSHA should be guaranteeing that each building is safe for anybody to enter. I also think that in listening to you tonight, if there's members of the board, which is a very small group of people who don't feel safe to meet together in a small group, and some that will not send their children to schools, it just says so much. And I also think that if people, parents can opt their children out and board members can opt themselves out of meeting, I think that teachers should also have the right to opt themselves out of in-school learning and teaching until they are assured that the buildings are safe. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is listed as Galaxy S10. I'm going to unmute you.
Hello.
Hello.
You can hear me? Okay. My name is Kirsten Holtz McFadden, and I am both a parent and a teacher. I implore the Human Resources Department to devise a separate form for those with comorbidities. The ADA form and FMLA form and FMLA are inadequate. I don't have a disability, and I don't want to file for FMLA. I want to work. I realize a COVID form does not exist, and neither did an ADA form years ago. It is not in my best interest health-wise, and in fact could very well cause my death to enter these buildings where in some cases children and staff may not have to wear a mask due to their own health issues. I wish to work with the distance learning program. Will there be a process for teachers to apply for distance learning programs for their building? And will they be returned to their buildings when it is deemed safe for all to return? In addition to the above, I encourage everyone to join us at our caravan this Thursday, July 3rd, 2020 at 10 a.m. in Hartford. Details can be found on Facebook at NHPS Advocates, Citywide Parent Team, and New Haven Educators page. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Marie Ackerman. Marie Ackerman, you are unmuted.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marie Ackerman, and I'm a para in the New Haven Public School System, and I have been employed in the New Haven Public School as a para for 25 years. I feel great concern for the teachers and the paras, and I want to thank Dr. Tracy and Dr. Jackson, the mayor, and all the members of the board for your support. We as paras assist our teachers lovingly, carefully, academically, and in every way possible. We need to have the same feelings that Mrs. Light said that her concerns were of accepting our students into a safe place. Many teachers I have spoken with and many teachers through the years that I've assisted are very fearful of coming back into the classroom. We all want to go back. I want to go back so badly, but I fear for my health too, and for the health of the students and the family and the staff and my own family at home. So I'm hoping, and I thank you for considering, and I wonder what it would take for us to be able to make that decision to begin to work, to start off with distant learning, because this virus is such an uncertain virus. And since the state has not even opened up into phase 3 yet, we don't know how much more that's going to spread. So I thank you very much, and I hope we all stay safe, and God bless.
Our next is Liz Fairhaven, resident Quinnipiac.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for providing this platform. And quickly, I just wanted to comment and question. My daughter attends Quinnipiac School. She'll be entering 5th grade in the fall. This school does not have a formal gymnasium nor cafeteria, nor do they have air conditioning. Last winter, before schools were closed, the heat stopped working completely, and our children were bused to Jepson for the rest of the day. What if this happens again? In addition, what is NHPS doing to address the issue of lack of technology, especially for families with multiple children in the district? Will online learning be available for snow days? Lastly, how will food distribution work as I plan on not sending my child back to school this year? What will the hours be, and will we be able to go to the school closest to us as the Grand Avenue Bridge is still closed due to restoration? Will I have to purchase a webcam for live instruction? We do have a desktop computer, however, it does not have a built-in webcam. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is James Brochin.
I had, I don't know if you can hear me, but I had a couple of short questions. One has to do with social distancing. I was paying very close attention to all the questions about this, and I wasn't sure whether I heard a clear answer about maintaining 6 feet apart for buses going to the school, coming entry to the school, leaving the school, lunchtime. I hear, I'm not sure if the answer about 1 kid per seat really answers the question about whether that is in fact 6 feet apart. So that was my first question. The second question, I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask it. In a few places in the documents that I just read, a clear statement about what kind of learning was going to go on. It said standards-based learning or standards-based grading or something like that. That has never been done in the school where I work. And if that is going to become the only thing for all schools, it's something I think that needs to be discussed so people are trained to know how to do it. Like that, it would seem to me that would be a change, a big change. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next to speak is Eileen Ayalo. Okay. Ms. Ayalo has an older version of Zoom. Be allowed to come up to panelists and will be removed immediately after. You may begin speaking. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, you may speak.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm sorry for the tech problems. Thank you to Mayor Elicker, the Board of Admin for the New Haven Board of Education, and administrators and our superintendent, Dr. Tracy. Thank you so much. I just have a couple of questions that were sort of raised by some comments that were made earlier. As far as cleaning up in classrooms, will teachers be required to clean up after every class? And will there be extra time allowed for that? And the materials, like someone mentioned the effects of the materials that are being used. Have the materials been tested for prolonged use and ingestion by people over time? Since we have a closed system, we can't open our windows. Those materials would be circulated constantly by every classroom over the day. I want to make sure as a cancer survivor that those materials don't have any detrimental effects for people.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nicole Brown.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Excuse me. I just have a few questions. What is the plan around children who will need to catch the bus, or children whose parents are afraid to put them on the bus? What will the city do to assure that those children are able to get to school? Will there be additional buses provided? I may have missed that portion of the meeting. The second thing I will say is, although my children are not going to go to school, I am going to opt out of in-person learning. I am happy that schools are opening because, as we know, school is a refuge for many students. My next question is, what is the plan around improving distant learning? My daughter attends Betsy Ross, and distant learning sucked for her. So what are the steps that are going to be taken to improve that for this coming school year for families like me who will make the decision to choose distance learning? That's it.
Thank you. The next speaker is Star Ross.
Hello?
Yes, Star Ross, you may speak.
Hi, so I am Kenya Ross, and I am a parent in the community. And I just have a few things that, I would like to address. So first, I just like to say I appreciate the work and the time and the planning that Dr. Tracy and her team and all those involved have done. I appreciate the hard work that you've done for our children. With that said, as a parent, I am concerned that there are too many moving pieces to this puzzle. Too many unknowns are still present, some of them related to transportation, sanitization. I'm concerned that added pressure will be added to the teachers, the bus drivers, and the admin staff to ensure that masks are worn in an effort to combat these moving pieces. I would much rather have my daughter miss a year of learning than to have to lose her to the COVID virus, or for her to lose her mother, as I am a parent that is high risk like many others. She may recover from the virus, but I may not. With that being said, if she loses a parent, what would her mental state be? Possibly from being exposed to the COVID from a classmate. I beg you to reconsider and reevaluate and acknowledge that we are not ready at this point to be back in the classroom. As a parent who has chosen to continue distance learning, I fear for the parents who have chosen to send their children back to the classroom. I thank you for all the work that you've done, but I believe that we still have work that needs to be done. Also, my daughter attends Betsy Ross. During the school year, she did inform me of many instances where there was no hand soap for them to wash their hands, no towels for them to dry their hands. This is concerning for me, especially at this time frame when we are in the midst of a pandemic. I will commend Betsy Ross for their distance learning, that she was able to stay on top of her assignments last year, but I'm concerned going into this year regarding transportation, sanitization, and the hygiene that is going to be provided in the school. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I appreciate again all the work that you have done.
The next speaker is Karen Wilkinson.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Congratulations, Dr. Tracy, on your appointment, and thank you so much for your leadership. I am a paraprofessional. I have been so for a very long time. I don't want to go back. I really do not want to go back. But my question is, if I opt out, will I be able to go back to the school that I'm coming from? And if I do opt out, what days are being used? And as far as the schools, the days, meaning, is it my sick days, or what will that look like? And my other thing is, with the schools, how do we know that the schools will be properly cleaned? And I say that to say, a school that I was in had so much mold in it that teachers and students had to be moved from the classrooms. So what is going to ensure us that these schools will be properly cleaned? And it does speak to the fact that maybe OSHA should make these determinations. Thank you for the opportunity.
Our next speaker is listed as Grace.
Hello. I am a spouse of a teacher at a couple schools in New Haven, and I have a couple quick questions. I do want to say that I am really impressed with all the work that's done. I actually feel slightly like 1% safer about the plan than I did coming into this meeting. As someone that has my own high-risk health issues, I'm concerned with my spouse going into the school. And I'm curious about a couple of things. A, if teachers choose to opt out to come back to school because they're concerned for their own or their family's health, what are the repercussions of that? And secondly, how will specials be handled in schools if we are trying to keep kids in the same classrooms throughout the day and not share things like for music and art classes? I haven't heard anything about that. I'm curious the plan there. Thank you.
So may I interject and say that we will answer questions, but not right now. So the silence does not mean we're not hearing you, but the questions are being recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy.
Okay, our next speaker is Julia Miller.
Hi. Hello?
Yes, you can be heard.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Julia Miller. I'm a New Haven Public Schools teacher and parent. I'm so grateful to work in this district with such dedicated educators and compassionate leadership under the guidance of Dr. Tracy. We need a safe, trauma-informed, and fully funded return to school. The unfunded state mandate of a full 5-day return for all grades K-12 is capricious and cruel. It is knowingly putting the lives of students and their families and educators and their families at risk. We must resist it. I teach in a building like many others where the windows don't open. I teach at a high school like many others where each student has their own individualized schedule of 8 classes, making it impossible to cohort. To make learning meaningful and active, I teach like so many of my colleagues using strategies that center student voices through small group and full class discussion and collaborative hands-on project-based assessments. Again, an impossibility to do while attempting to follow the guidelines that will keep us safe. Guidelines, by the way, that will be impossible themselves to achieve. How can one effectively socially distance with so many students in the room? With cases surging across the country, knowing full well the likelihood there will be another outbreak and more outbreaks in school will have to once again shutter, why not spend the short yet valuable time we have left making full remote learning and or at least the safer hybrid plan work really well? It's clear that after tonight, this is what NHPS preferred way forward would be. If the state has paused phase 3, not allowing more than 25 people indoors at a time, why is it okay for schools to open with hundreds of people inside them for many hours a day? Are our lives that invaluable? We have seen that COVID-19, I'm sorry about my daughter. Sorry about that. We have seen that COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting communities of color. I've already had students lose loved ones. How can we consciously enter into this knowing that more life can be lost and that districts like ours, which are historically and inequitably underfunded, will be impacted the most? We need to rally together and make the state change course and allow and fund a more humane approach. Thank you so much.
The next speaker is Eddie Blue. Eddie Blue, you are able to, yep, you are able to speak. That's on his side. Mr. Blue, please unmute yourself. You can speak now. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Thank you again. Just 2 quick things I want to touch on. I'm connected to Head Start, and we have kids that catch the bus. And our bus aides actually put the kids in car seats and then take them out of car seats. So that's a concern for me because that person is going to be in contact with our kids 4 times in a day. To put them in the car seat at the bus stop, take them out of the car seat when they get to school, and the same thing at pickup. So that's the whole 6-foot thing out the window. So they're not passing each other on the bus, but they're going to be coming in direct contact with the bus aide that's going to put them in. The second thing I just want to briefly touch on is Dr. Joyner did speak about dealing with challenging people. I'll say it that way. Are we going to have an increase in the security presence in the school? I know in the school that my children went to, we didn't have the same guard more than 6 or 8 weeks at a time. We seem to be the place where people that were on light duty landed at until they got better to go back to their school. And because we were a Head Start, it was perceived that they didn't necessarily need security. Well, unless you've ever picked a kid up from pre-K at 2 o'clock, we need security just as much as anybody else. So those are the two things I just wanted to touch on. Added security in the schools to help with people that may be non-compliant. And again, our bus age, temperatures, things of that nature, their ability to keep themselves clean in between touching kids, and how will that impact our time with getting kids to school on time? Because we use the same bus for both tiers, tier 1 and tier 2. They drop off, they pick up, and they come back. So I don't know if we can really squeeze that in. Okay. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. The next speaker is Di. Hello, you may speak now. Hello, person listed as Di, you may speak. D. Okay. I'm going to mute you, and if you're ready, re-raise your hand. We move on to Eric Uhas.
Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Tracy, Dr. White, Madam President, members of the board, thank you very much for having this meeting and for giving me the opportunity to speak. I have two hats on tonight. I'm assistant principal of the Sound School, and I am also the parent of two New Haven Public School students. And I have one question from each hat. The first one is, and I put this in the Q&A, but I just wanted to bring it forward. A gentle reminder that we have some schools, one that I'm intimately familiar with, that do not use for transportation for New Haven students, but instead use Connecticut transit buses. And also we have inter-district schools that rely on transportation from the sending districts, which use a variety of different transportation companies. And so my question is it even possible, and if so, how, to ensure that those other conveyances are adhering to the bus safety protocols that First Student has put up? My second question, or my hope as a parent, we here at home are leaning towards doing distance learning for the fall as a personal family decision for our two students aged 13 and 14. And because it's likely that they'll be doing that totally independently while I'm at school, and my wife is an essential worker and she'll be at work, I am hoping that the protocols for distance learning for families like ours that opt for that will be flexible in terms of due dates and assignment completion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Sarger.
Yes. Hi, good evening. I want to echo, first of all, Dr. Tracy and your team, the plan. I mean, this is such a Herculean task. And I appreciate as a teacher how much work that has gone into it. I wanted to share with the board two thoughts. This summer, actually, I just finished today, week 4 of a summer program that I've been teaching in New York City, in which I teach 6 classes of 2nd graders and 3rd graders. And this particular camp where I'm working has been, it was 600 kids. It's now down to 200. I have fewer than 10 students in a room. And I can tell you today that there are never fewer than 3 adults in the room. And I counted students, I had 8. And still, I had 3 girls when my back was turned, gathering together, whispering in one another's ears, laughing, and you could see the spit flying through the air. And the bottom line is that I don't see how it's possible to control little kids in this environment, in this age. I'm watching it in front of me. And I come home every Tuesday and I go through a decontamination routine. So for my colleagues who are elementary schools, in elementary schools, I just want to feel for them. And I urge you to consider truly how much we really have in our control. The second, more personal to me, is as a high school teacher, I saw a lot of my students this spring fall out of their learning through no fault of their own. Their parents lost their jobs, and so they went to work. They were responsible for their younger siblings' education and making sure that their distance learning was taken care of. And as a result, they missed their own. And I just want to, we're in a community where we have to be able to support our families. And I'd like us to just consider what some out of the box thinking might look like that would allow these students to also partake in distance learning while also supporting their families and their siblings. And I put out the offer of evening classes. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay. The next speaker is Jessica Demota, and also board member Anthony Fiore will be joining into the meeting now.
Hi, my name is Jessica Domator, and I am a high school counselor at one of the magnet schools in New Haven. And I just have a couple questions. My first question is, will there be full-time nurses in all buildings? There was a lot of emphasis on the health aspects and the safety aspects in regards to obviously COVID-19. But I know the building that I'm in, as of the last 2 years, we've only had a nurse 2 days a week in our building. And I just wonder if that's going to be the same. And if it is, then who's responsible for screening kids if we think they're sick, or who's taking their temperatures and deciding if they need to go home or not? That's one of my biggest concerns. And I echo what some of our other colleagues have said. Our teachers being given the same option that students and families are given, as well as board members, in regards to if they're just not comfortable going back to work in the building and they'd like to choose remote learning. Is that option given to them? That's it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Battle.
Hi, I do want to say that I do appreciate the hard work that Dr. Tracy and her team did. You guys were given in a task and you completed it, and you could tell you worked hard at it. And also the board members, and hello to the mayor. My question is, the things that are shared in school, they share textbooks, they share Chromebooks, they share different supplies. Are those going to be wiped down? Is there going to be a way that, things won't be transmitted through that? I know in the last call, someone had asked about gym, and they said that a ball would have to be wiped down before the next kid touched it. So who's going to be responsible for wiping down the things that the kids are going to be sharing from class to class? And I know last year in our school, there weren't enough textbooks, so they were sharing them in classes. The other question I have is, how many days will schools need to shut down after a positive test? Who will be cleaning the bathrooms, and will they be done throughout the day? Like after each kid uses them, after a class uses it, how will the cleaning of the bathrooms go? Distance learning for us was not bad this year. We were at Betsy Ross, but I do look forward to a more creative way, more fun. It was, some glitches. So I was very happy to see in the presentation that you do have new ideas for that. The other thing for me is, wouldn't it be counterproductive not to social distance on the school buses, and you plan so carefully to keep them apart in the schools, just to put them back on the bus without social distancing? That was a question I had. And the other thing is you have something in place to help with the kids should a teacher or peer pass away from the coronavirus, what the effects of that would be, and if you have something in place to handle that. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Natalia Beninsky. I do apologize if I mispronounced that. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. As a New Haven Public Schools teacher, I poured through the state's 50-page plan in search of concrete guidance and preparations that would give me a sense of how reopening schools in person could possibly be safe for our community. Instead, I was confronted with the notion of feasibility, which appears 13 times in the document. Reduced class sizes, student cohorts, and single-direction hallways and staircases are not mandated, but rather will be implemented only where feasible. Maintaining 6 feet distance, procedures for monitoring students and staff members' symptoms, and provision of cloth face coverings, again, when feasible. Bus capacity will not be reduced, but the reopening plan suggests, quote, keep in mind the feasibility and availability of alternate transportation by parents and guardians. For whom will these life-saving recommendations actually be feasible? Commissioner of Education Miguel Cardona recently stated, reopening will look a lot different in Salisbury or in Sprague, Connecticut than it will in Hartford or Bridgeport. We know this is true, and we also know why. Racism, segregation, and unjust school funding formulas. Salisbury schools, which are 83% white, receive $22,909 per student, while Bridgeport, 87% of whose students are youth of color, only receives $14,041 per pupil. In our own underfunded district, where we are annually informed of multi-million-dollar deficits, we know these recommendations will not actually be feasible for us. Dr. Tracy, I understand that this decision is not in your hands, but it is no longer in the hands of a state that is demanding our return, knowing full well it will mean more death, especially among youth of color and their families. This decision is now in our hands as educators, students, and families. We need to do what is best to protect our community. We must refuse the state's mandate to return to in-person schooling. And for when we do return, we must do the deeper work of fighting for a more equitable and just education system. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dennis Wilson.
Hey, everyone. First of all, thanks, Dr. Tracy and Mayor Elliker and the board for your leadership. I am the Director of Education Services at IRIS, and we gathered a bunch of our high school students together a few weeks ago and asked them what they would like to share with the Board of Education in regards to returning to school. So I'd just like to share some of their comments. They did say, we do fear for our health and safety. Many of us would prefer to go to school online only, but we are willing to go to school in person because as English language learners, we really struggled in online classes in spring 2020. We worry we will fall behind if school is completely online and never be able to catch up. For in-person schooling, they request that teachers use in-person days to review assignments and topics covered in online school days so they are not getting new material for the first time online. They request that English learners be placed in online classes for all subjects with teachers or teaching assistants who have ESOL training. Many of us have different levels of computer literacy and struggle to understand online assignments and instruction without individualized help. They also request that teachers of English language learners remember that older siblings of younger students are doing homework and also teaching our younger siblings when classes are completely online. We are glad to help because it means our younger siblings are safe, but we need teachers to take this into account when creating the online course load for middle and high schoolers with younger siblings in school. They also have requested, if possible, interpreters in online classes for students with very low levels of English. So just wanted to pass those concerns along. Thanks again for your leadership. And this goes without saying, but there's IRIS and so many other partner community organizations in New Haven that stand ready to help. So please don't hesitate to call on us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Highsmith.
Good evening.
Good evening. We can hear you.
Okay, so just a couple of things I would like to point out. Is there a plan or plans in place for students that have special needs or preschool students that cannot or will not wear a mask throughout the day? What will fire drills and active shooter drills look like with social distancing in schools? And lastly, I'm sorry, not lastly, what would a typical school day look like in terms of the hours? Will the hours be decreased? Will it be similar to a half-day schedule? And lastly, will you incorporate more substitute teachers in all the schools to help with the students? Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes all those that have signed up, who have raised hands, and I believe we are at the hour mark.
We got about 15 minutes left, but that's okay. If no one else raised hands, that's fine. We can end it there.
We have 144 questions.
Okay. We have a question. Donna is listed here. And
it says Donna raised hand.
yep, I'm about to allow to speak. Also for the public, public comment allows you to ask questions one time, so that we can have as many people ask their questions. Please remember that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm a grandmother of 2 elementary school children and a 1st grader and a 4th grader, and the parent of a New Haven public school teacher and the mother-in-law of a New Haven public school teacher. I'm trying to figure out what will happen to the 1st grader on the 4 days or the 3 days she's not in, or the day she's not in school, and the 4th grader on the 3 days she's not in school, and the parents are in school all day, and we're older and at risk and cannot take the children. And what's the after school plan? What's the childcare plan? That's it.
Thank you. No one else has raised their hand, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. That concludes public participation. I think that went pretty well for a first try with public participation via Zoom. So thank you all for participating, and thank you board members for a great meeting, and Dr. Tracy and her team for a great presentation. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Mayor's trying to second, but he's on mute.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll vote. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Mr. Golson?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner? Oh, Dr. Joyner's not here. Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
I am a yes. Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yeah, I apologize for being late. I did not get the email. I apologize.
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you. We'll have to make sure that you're on the email thread.
It's on the BOE.
Yes.
Okay.
My education email isn't working. I can't log into it, sadly.
No problem. We'll take care of that.
Okay, we'll figure that out. Thank you. And Ms. Aruna is not with us, correct? No. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Good night, all. Good night.
Good night.